Good morning. We'd like to welcome everyone to our Mesa City Council meeting. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Today is the City Council study session for Thursday, May 25th. All of our council is present, and I believe that Mr. Summers is joining us via Zoom, and he will join us in person later. Mr. Summers, are you there? I see we've got several Zoom. Yeah. We'll check in on Mr. Summers later. I know there he is. All right. Mr. Summers is at a speaking engagement this morning and will join, I think he'll participate the first part virtually and then join us in person later. Mr. Summers, are you there?
I'm here, Mayor, thank you.
Great, thank you. Item 1 on our agenda is a presentation and to provide direction on Mesa's 2050 General Plan Draft Vision Statement and Guiding Principles, and to receive an update on Mesa's Balanced Housing Plan.
Well, Mayor, Council, good morning. It's good to be with you today. My name is Jeff Robbins. I'm the project manager for the General Plan Update. Joining me today to talk about the General Plan portion of our presentation is our Planning Director, Mary Kopaski Brown, and the President and CEO of Logan Simpson Design, Bruce Megan.
Testing, good.
Welcome.
Morning.
Thank you.
All right, well, what a great subject for a Thursday morning, and thank you for having me here again, Bruce Megan, Logan Simpson, Principal in charge of the General Plan. Mayor, council members, want to just first start by commending you for taking on this great, huge, giant effort on behalf of the community. Your overall general plan, it's your long-term vision. You got to do it only once in a while, but setting out where you're going and how to make the community better. It's clearly shaped not only by leadership, but also our businesses, but even more importantly, our community members all have input into this document. In the end, you'll have a resulting series of guiding principles, policies, and detailed actions on how to get that done, allowing the community to move forward in a positive way. This is also required by law, so it has 17 required topic elements. So again, the word, yeah, exactly. So it's a general plan, so it covers everything from land use to other elements, including things like resiliency to economic development. It also requires a public involvement plan. That's something that you've already approved, and to make sure that the community is fully engaged. That's something that's extremely important, and we take that seriously. In the end, the citizens will have to ratify this document, so it will be a citizens-based plan. So that's also exciting, and the direction it's going, it's looking good. This will also be effective for, it's a 10-year planning horizon, so it looks out way into the future. In terms of how long it takes to do a general plan, just to get that community input, this is at least a year and a half process. We are on track, so the green color there shows tasks that have been completed to date. So I think you've got 6 or so tasks there. Project kickoff was really starting off and just listening, making sure that we're rolling. Community context is looking at trends. Where are we going with such a quick environment that's changing so fast in terms of technology, transportation, the environment around us, demographics, making sure that we're grounded there. To developing vision and guiding principles, you'll look at those today, so exciting progress there. We are moving into the orange. The orange is where we're applying that vision and guiding principles to the ground and to policy. So how do we actually make this happen? It's great to have these aspirational statements. The other thing is how does this work in terms of implementation? Then moving right into the draft plan as we get to the end of the year. And then as we get into the spring, working through the acceptance and adoption process, which does take a lot of time to make sure that the community is very, very comfortable with the document. In terms of engagement, that was one of the things that we said was extremely important. Great success so far. We're talking about over 11,000 engagements, or people actively engaged, as well as many other thousands that know about the document. This is still rising and increasing, and we expect it to continue to go up throughout the process. In terms of formats, it's everything from hands-on to more high-touch interactions with the public. We have over 7 community meetings, 18 meetings with boards and commissions, and also just engagement via electronic mediums. In terms of the top community issues, no surprises here. So I think as council members, you know them, but it's good to always do a check-in with our community. It's making sure that we have those retail choices that people want right here in Mesa, a variety of housing for our workforce, but also for those where we want to match housing with those future jobs. So looking at both of those. Public safety, incredibly safe city, but making sure that we continue to emphasize that safety as we go forward. Got to have traffic on there, right? It's just a requirement, but really thinking about multimodal education, multimodal transportation. In terms of education, it's making sure that we have the best teachers and the best school system, and continue to support that. Water supply, we're in Arizona, it's always on people's mind, but also how do we be more efficient with our resources. On parks and rec, indoor spaces, and making sure that our rec spaces are dispersed throughout the community in an equitable way. Redevelopment, that we have areas of the city that just need some love and attention, but it's also some of your biggest potential for growth and economic development. And then that goes hand in hand with access to high-paying jobs. You are on your way towards that greater job housing balance, so less people commuting out and more as Mesa being the choice city where you live, work, and play.
I'm sorry, can I ask you, this slide, is this the result of the output reach you've done so far?
Correct.
The question is, these are the top 10 responses in this order?
Correct,
Okay.
Mayor. And the results are this long, and this is a slide of just 10 items. The individual comments are incredibly interesting and even more informative, so there's a lot more depth to this, as well as some trend analysis.
I think Ms. Duff has a question.
I just wanted to confirm that these are listed in order of priority, like number one, or not necessarily?
I have to, maybe to clarify, they are one point of data set or
Okay.
pulled out of one piece of information. So to say that they are the top 10, I feel like David Letterman or something like that, would be too strong a statement. All of them are important, and it's probably more representative to take the numbers off of those. However, we did list them
Okay.
in general importance, but I couldn't tell you that, number 3 shouldn't be moved to number 2 or something along those lines.
So it's not a priority list? I mean, it could be
They're all
bullet
important.
points as far,
Yeah.
Interchangeably, so the numbers are just matter of reference and not necessarily order of priority.
I think more frequent is probably a better
Okay.
way to say it, but if you were to take one like access to high-paying jobs versus looking at public safety, one in terms of analysis may be more important overall to make the vision happen than another. So these are people's perceptions right off.
Okay.
You have to make sure you look at this data with the correct lens.
Thank you, Bruce. Mayor Giles, council members, thank you for having us today. The real meat of the general plan presentation is to really talk through the draft vision and guiding principles that we've developed. So we as staff started with a kind of a template of what we thought the vision and guiding principles should be. Worked really closely with our technical advisory committee, which is made up of all the different departments here in the city. Worked with our directors from all of the different departments that are involved in the process. Actually presented these also to our general plan advisory committee for their input. And now what we want to do is bring them to the city council for your input before we take them out to the public. So today is really a discussion of these are generally what we're looking at from the vision and the guiding principles. And now we want to be able to go out to the public to get input from the public on these. As Bruce said, there are 17 elements that are required. You're going to see we've combined some of them, so we don't have to have just 17 standalone silo chapters. So we've tried to group them into what seem to make sense from a planning and a land use kind of perspective. So I'll go through each of them. We can stop on each slide, or I can go through all of them, however you'd like to do it, Mayor.
Let's be optimistic and think we're going to get through the slides, but I have a feeling we'll probably stop you several times along the
Okay,
way.
okay. So we'll start with the draft vision statement. So the vision statement that we've drafted is that Mesa is a city of extraordinary places and rich culture where people connect and businesses of all sizes thrive in a vibrant, safe, and healthy environment.
Keep going.
Okay? Don't stop. Keep going, Jeff. Yeah, yes. The land use and growth areas, we nurture and sustain a balanced mix of land uses that connect, attractive and welcoming neighborhoods, vibrant shopping areas, and thriving employment centers. For circulation and mobility, we provide a safe, convenient, and well-connected transportation network that offers efficient choices for how residents, employees, and visitors move around the city. Environment, conservation, energy, and water, we value and protect our desert climate and environment and ensure resources are efficiently used and sustainably managed to accommodate future growth. Parks, recreation, and open space, we offer a safe, equitable, and connected system of parks and recreational opportunities that foster healthy and vibrant communities and contribute to a high-quality experience for those who live, work, and play in Mesa. For neighborhood preservation and revitalization, we celebrate and invest in Mesa's unique places by preserving and revitalizing existing neighborhoods, shopping areas, and downtown. Under housing, we support a diverse range of quality housing types and choice for all income levels for our current and future residents. Social services, healthcare, and education, we partner with community organizations to secure equitable access to high-quality social services, healthcare, and education. Historic and cultural resources. We celebrate and embrace the heritage of Mesa, protect our historic and cultural resources, and provide diverse arts and cultural programs to engage the community, foster civic pride, and create authentic, memorable experiences. Public safety, we provide responsive police, fire, and medical services with compassion and respect. Public services and facilities, we respond to the needs of residents by providing quality, reliable, and cost-effective public services and investing in public facilities that evoke civic pride in Mesa. Economic development, we support the key pillars of education and workforce development to attract, retain, and expand both small and large businesses, creating diverse, quality job opportunities citywide. And finally, cost of development. We require that private development invest its fair share of the cost for long-term associated public improvements. So that is the draft of the vision statement and the 12 guiding principles, which those 12 guiding principles will turn into chapters in our plan. Once we have these ironed out with our public and City Council is happy with the final results after the community engagement, we'll develop a series of policies that sit under each of these guiding principles so that those policies help us to implement that guiding principle, all which lead us back to that vision. Those policies will have very detailed actions with an implementation plan that includes cost, responsibility, time frame, so that we know how we're going to achieve those policies. So we're really trying to nest all the way from our vision all the way down to our action plan.
So Mary, you're asking the council to consider these as what we're going to take to the public.
Correct.
And then come back, then we'll come back to the
That's correct.
council. So we're not saying this is your final opportunity, but it's kind of what we want to go take now out on the road again.
Correct.
If you would, and then come back to council with the final versions. We need to start then settling in the final versions to start drafting up the language that supports this, right?
And to also start working on our policies and our detailed action plan.
So the first draft of the plan has 12 chapters, and you've just read us the description of those chapters, and now we're going to fill in the substance. And we can tweak how many chapters we have, and we can tweak the descriptions, but this is our starting point.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, there are certainly, I have specific things that I would, speaking for myself, that I would like to see addressed, having to do with housing and food security and education and, things that I I hope we address, but I think clearly they fit under those 12 categories. And so as this evolves, I think we'll all have lots to say about it.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. So when I look at the top community issues, you know, the 10, I'm hoping that they tie in to the draft and vision statement, because some of the things that I made some notes as I read through the last couple of days, but, you know, vibrant shopping areas, I mean, that is a good wish list. I mean, but seriously, in Mesa, I think how many vibrant shopping centers we actually do have. I leaned over to District 2 and she said Dana Park is the best, but I think that's something we need to culturally, you know, develop and work with the community and get their vision on them. And then I had some other thoughts too, but at the end of the day, I think tying in the community issues with this draft and vision statements is important so that they feel that their input is heard and engagement, then as a council, we can make an informed decision.
Mayor, Councilmember Freeman, that's a great point. And one of the things you'll see when we start getting into those more details in those policies, so under economic development, there very well could be a policy that deals with, say, commercial and retail choices. So remember, every time we step down, we're going to get into a little bit more detail so that we're making sure we're capturing these community issues in these, not only the aspirational vision and guiding principles, but in our policies and in the actions to actually achieve that and address them.
Good, thank you. I know Mr. Robbins has been with me on several community events, so I appreciate him being there and promoting this. And the other thing on the historic and cultural part of drafting guidance, I just want to make sure that we, and I think that's on number 15,
15?
that we look at preservation of our historic and cultural resources that we have in our community, because historically some of these have built the foundation of our city and now we've moved past those, but we need to remember where we came from is some of what I believe in. So, you know, that might be some conservation of some areas, historic buildings and other things that come into our respective districts in our city. So hopefully we can focus on that too. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Goforth.
I understand sort of the funnel effect that you're gonna get more specific and narrow as you go, but you may lose the public past the guiding principles. I don't know how many people are gonna read, so I think it's important that those say what we mean. And my initial impression here was that we're not specific enough in what we really mean in these. So for instance, I don't know what nurturing a mix of land use means. What does it mean to connect, attract? What do you mean connect? By car? I mean, do you mean by walking? I think we need to say what we mean and get more specific. That's my overall. And then the last one, I don't understand that one.
So the,
I mean,
the
that
last
does not seem like a vision statement to me, and that it should be as a policy, maybe to get us to a vision.
So Mayor Giles, Councilmember Goforth, I can explain that. That is one of the actual required elements within the general plan, is that we look at the cost of development to make sure that private development is paying their fair share of improvements that are needed for their development.
But it doesn't have to be in your vision statement, does it?
It is a separate element, so it's not in the vision statement, it's a guiding principle for that chapter. So there is a chapter on cost of development, and that's the guiding principle for that chapter.
That's interesting. I mean, I went out and I read other cities, and it wasn't like this. So I just offer that. Like, I would rather not see in our guiding principles a statement like that.
Okay.
And again, I would like you to get more specific. That's what I would like to. I would like to see more specificity in our guiding principles, with the thought that you may not get somebody beyond that statement.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Duff? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know what the answer to this is, so I'm just going to throw this out there, that I think it would be beneficial for us to think about what is our identity as Mesa. Just what do we want people to think of when they think of Mesa? What do we want Mesa to be? I just feel like that's maybe, like, I feel like we're trying to do everything, which I guess every city is. You have to do everything. But I feel like maybe you could think of like Chandler's this type of city, Gilbert's this type of city, Scottsdale's this, like what is Mesa? What do we want people to think of when they think of Mesa? And I think if we could answer that question more clearly, I don't know what the answer is, like I said, I have ideas, but if we could like think of what our identity is of Mesa, I think that would help us to see what we want these guiding principles to say. I'm sure that's what you're trying to do, but I just feel like that could be clearer maybe.
I just, I need to take time and look at our current guiding principles and compare them to the ones we have now and see if, is it transformative or is it just the rehashing of the same principles that we had before? Also, I think when we get more in the detail of it, we'll be able to better get into the guiding principle because then we'll be able to identify elements that are very important versus kind of a standard. And make sure they're implemented in that guiding principle to give it more identity into what we're trying to get to over the next 10 years for sure. To have that implemented so we don't get so general that we cover everything and we don't cover anything type of thing. And even sometimes I cringe a little bit when I hear shopping areas because I think shopping areas is so yesterday and it's more activity centers or, you know, shopping is, when I think the today's shopping is a list of services, things to do, restaurants. So we'd have to look at the context of what does shopping mean and not feel like we're still describing the 70s, so.
Thank you.
A couple comments, thanks.
Great. Council, any other comments? All right, thank you. Does this complete the presentation or?
The portion on the general plan, Mayor, I just want to confirm, are we okay to take these out or do you want more detail?
I'm not okay. I'd like some more detail.
Okay.
I agree, more detail for me.
And my caution to council is that then what's left after that, right? Because this is intended to be, we can get in more detail, but if you go see the pattern of these plans, you kind of have these statements of aspiration, and then you get into the specifics about that. So, and I think we want to be careful what we're presuming, what we're hearing from the community about. I guess, give me an idea of specifics. I think that's what we're going to need to know, because we've tried not to be specific here and hold the specifics for later where we can define a specific activity that leads to an accomplishment, so.
Well, I guess I would say, as I said, what do you mean when you say connected? What do you mean?
And it could be in all its forms.
And I will say, I did go back to the 2040 plan, and it's specific. It says.
In this, at this level?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
There's 11 principles, and it's much more specific. You can read it, you know what they're talking about.
Okay.
Yep.
And maybe those could have been included into, you know, that we could have seen prior to see how they've morphed into what we're visioning
You
today.
could do that.
That would help me to see where 10 years ago to today.
Okay, that's fair.
Because I do think Jen's point was well taken by me, that like, that would be helpful to see, are we transforming? Are we doing something different?
From 10 years ago, what is the difference?
Yeah, and I didn't go look, Alicia's a better student than I am, so I didn't go look and see what they were. I didn't even think about doing that, but I think that would really help.
Okay.
I think my question, so what do you mean about when you go back to the community and talk to them? Like, what's that plan look like? Because I think that's where you're meaning to go specific based on, I see these as like headings, right? Headings that then you're talking about the specifics of, with people that fit into these, right? And so I think that's where I want to understand, what do you mean about going back to the community and talking about these in specific and tweaking these pieces, or is it about the specifics of what feeds into these pieces? Because that's where I was, what I was, from your comments, kind of taking from this. This is just like headings on an index where you go, okay, well, we're going to talk about economic development. Here's the specifics economic developments. Yeah, we can have this vision at the top, right? But the specifics of what it feeds into that piece, that's going to be outlined here. This is just a guiding kind of index piece of what people can kind of quickly go to. Might misunderstand what you're saying, but could you elaborate on what you're going to take out to the community?
Yeah, council member, if I may, you are exactly right. This is the structure for the conversation. So you've got to start somewhere where you have the topics in which you want the community to discuss. So a statement, and that statement was developed by looking through the details and picking out words, and then those words go into that overall statement. So they are, they are aspirational, and their generality is probably due to the public comments that we got and the words that we got. So we're trying to balance that and say, yes, it's a one-to-one. When we go to the public, those become the structure for the conversation for the next tier down discussion. We've already got a list of policies that have been started to be developed based on public comment, which do get to the specifics. In addition, when we go to the public, back to the comment, that great comment on what does this statement mean, we will be using a lot of visuals in which we ask the public, when you talk about this, do you mean this, or do you mean this, or do you mean this? And it's the subtleties of those things. So back to mobility, are we talking about enhancing connectivity via greenways and north, south, east, west, and through multimodal connections? Is that what you mean? When we talk about recreation, is a greater emphasis on dispersed recreational amenities and that idea of indoor versus outdoor. So we'll be giving them the choices that will then provide the detail for that overall guiding principle.
So will then that change the guiding principle a little bit? You'll go back and you revise it?
You're already ahead of me, yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay,
And then
so-
by seeing it all together, it provides that overall, what does this actually mean, which would be a great advancement over your last plan. So imagery is everything. It's hard to use words to describe things like intensity and density and vibrancy and so on. We're going to be using a lot of imagery in order to say, did we get it right?
Okay, that's interesting, that you'll kind of go back and fill this in, I mean, but this statement in. I mean, not just everything that falls under it, but the actual guiding principle will be tweaked based on.
Good.
Interesting, okay. And are they gonna know that? Because as you presented today, we didn't really know that, you know? So will the public know that when you go through that process?
So Mayor Giles, Councilmember Goforth, based on this conversation, there's ideas probably running through all of our heads of how we get that specificity into the discussion with the public and how we make sure that they understand this is an aspirational goal, aspirational statement for that chapter of the plan that then will get into that specificity, and we'll be able to give them ideas on, so if we go to mobility, we talk about pedestrians or connectivity, pedestrian connectivity, transit connectivity, roads, trails that are, you know, off-road trails. So all of those pieces are part of how you connect people. And we can make sure that those specific words are there for them to trigger as they're looking at the graphics.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because as you know, working with the public, the more you give them, the better, right? So if you give them this general thing, you don't get as much feedback. That's what, I still stand by, I think there needs to be a little bit more specificity in here before you go to them, so that they have that, and they can say, well, I don't want, you know, I don't mean that, you know, what I'm saying, excuse me.
Yep.
So,
I'd like to add that we are creating our 2050 vision statement, and 2050 is a timeline also on our climate action plan of achieving many goals, and that we implement that in all our visioning so that we can get to those 2050 goals. Thanks.
Thank you. Good luck with this. I agree that these are all very aspirational goals, and to me, I guess I would just like to make sure we also focus on what is actually attainable, right? It'd be great to have a wish list, but if it really is a bunch of things that is not the role of local government to make those things come true, then what's the point of this, right? I mean, I think you ask a lot of people, what's a well-planned city? And they'd say, oh, I want a Costco and 5 miles away, and I want a Chick-fil-A 3 miles away, and they think that we're retail developers, and we're not. I mean, we certainly partner with retail developers, but that's not the function of government, is to, make sure you have a Chick-fil-A 2 miles away. So I'd love to focus on, yes, let's be, tell us your wildest hopes and dreams for the community, but let's funnel it into what our role is to, climate action plan and access to education and parks, and that we own that, right? That's who we are. So let's focus on that, because then it will be a useful document going forward for future councils. Just to state the obvious, but thank you. Anything else in your presentation?
Not on the general plan, but now Rachel is going to walk you through the balanced housing plan.
Okay, thank you.
I'll jump in. So I'm gonna jump in real quick. There is one last thing that we want to bring to your attention, council, and also to the public, is that we were going to have our large public meetings, and we would love to have everybody in the community come out. We've have different locations in every district, so there's a location close to wherever you live in the city. And we've talked a little bit about the visuals and drilling down. That's going to happen at these public meetings. And so if you're listening to this and this is of interest, please come to these meetings. We'll do some of the general planning stuff, but it'll also have a little bit of magic and a little bit of fun, because we want to visualize the city in a different way, so we can get to better statements. So all of those dates, locations, those are available right now at tomorrowsmesa.com. If you just scroll down to the bottom of the page, all 6 of our event locations are there, and again, we'd love to see members from the public there.
I get there's probably a timing issue on this, but June and July are probably the 2 worst months for community meetings.
Yes.
Heat, vacations, people don't do stuff in June and July, so I think it's probably like literally the worst 2 months of the entire year to do community meetings. But I know we're on a timing schedule, so I get that, but that's my thoughts on that. Not that I get great participation even in October or something, but in my district, but I just think June and July are like, we're shooting ourselves in the foot there.
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, so you're not wrong. I think if we could just bend everything to the schedule, we wouldn't have put them exactly there either. One thing to consider about our public engagement schedule is that it's a year long, and so we have activities pretty much in every quarter of that year. So something was going to fall during the summer based on how we have to continue to feed the plan information to move it along. And we did a lot of outdoor events, so a lot of booths. Those had to be in the spring. I mean, there's no way those can operate. There's no events going on in the summer. So you are right. Conditions have made that, we have to kind of go into the summer. We are going to do our absolute best to get the word out, and we understand that because it is the summer, people are gone. There may be some availability issues. We will also have some content online. So if people can't maybe come out to a public meeting, but they still want to participate and engage in a way that helps them to help us drill down, they can do that virtually instead of having to be present, because we do understand scheduling.
I think people who are paying attention that want to be a part of this and have their voice heard, there's ways to do that, right? So it would just be all the other 509,000 people in the city that, that maybe would go to something like this, but not, they're out of town or something. Anyways, but yeah, there are ways, obviously, to participate.
Here's a crazy idea. That, I would talk to Andrea back there from Parks and say, can we hijack one of the city swim meets? Because you'll have a few thousand hardcore Mesa people, in June and July at a city facility that you could pass, a pass-along card to and say, while you're sitting here for an hour in the sun waiting for your 5-year-old to swim, log on and give us 10 seconds of your time.
That's a brilliant idea, Mayor, and that's how we've gotten the numbers that we're getting, is both the booths combined with the digital exercises online. But I think Mr. Robbins puts out a good point. There's events in each district that, yes, they may be pretty tempered, but then in addition to the online component, that's going to be running the whole time, same visuals will be up there, so the exercises will be the same, so we'll be able to pull data in a very consistent way. Again, how many people come to a workshop compared to doing online is getting disproportionate now with more people online, so we want to provide the same opportunities both ways. In addition, there will also be a hub where you can go and drop in. Those hubs are going to be sort of a cool place where if you want to get out of the heat and you are in town, it's something where you can drop by, and those will be exciting. So it'll be another chance for people to engage farther down the road. So really trying to think about the hot season differently.
Remind me, the mesalistens.com is where you can go to click on the 2050. Is there a button there, right? mesalistens.com. That's where you can find about the trees initiative and a bunch of other things, yes?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, yes, that is correct. If you go, we have our own URL, so tomorrowsmesa.com, and that has the transit plan, transportation, housing is out there. We have them all there, and actually Arts and Culture is now joining us because they're doing some engagement, so they have a subpage there too. But it's all housed under mesalistens.com, so you can find all of our content by going to Mesa Listens.
And I think that's the easiest way to get the information out there is just if we can tell everyone one website, and then they can find what they want on there to click to. So that's what I'm doing, is telling people mesalistens.com. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead. Any other comments before we proceed? All right, thank you.
All right, so Mayor, Council, Rachel Nettles, Assistant Planning Director. So we also wanted to provide you with an update on the Balanced Housing Master Plan. So as you're aware, we have several other specific plans that are being updated at the same time as the general plan. And the idea is that while they are being drafted and they're going out to the public for feedback, these plans will actually be completed a little bit ahead of time of the general plan, because all those policies and details will really feed up into the general plan, which is that overarching policy document. So as we discussed earlier with our outreach that we've done so far, we know housing is a very important topic. So while it's a required element of the general plan, there's so much nuance to housing, and just the importance of it today, just in the country overall, but then in the state and in the city as well. It's very important that we look at the policies and actions that we can take as well to kind of create this environment and a situation where housing is attainable and it covers the spectrum for all of our residents. So the Housing Master Plan was last updated in 2017, and with that they did some initial data collection and analysis. But now we're really digging into refining that, and we once again are going out and updating all that data collection, and through that we'll be making policy recommendations that will become part of the Balanced Housing Master Plan, and then will feed up into the general plan. So why do the plan? So as I talked about, such an important topic, so we really need to understand all the nuances to the different kind of dynamics of housing in Mesa. So right now, where staff is at is we're really digging into the data to try to understand kind of what the inventory is of the housing stock in Mesa, what our demographics are, what the demand is. And once we have that baseline data, what we can then do is kind of forecast what our future needs would be, and also kind of look at what our, our vision and our goals are for the city of how we might be able to accomplish that. So with the housing needs assessment and inventory that's being conducted right now, what that does is that looks at the different kind of product types that we have in the city. So looks at the number of single-family homes, duplexes, multifamily units, so really get an understanding of how many are out there and where they're located. We also look at, the cost. So what is the home value, what are rent prices? We're looking at, what is the condition of those? So what years are they built, kind of what spectrum do they fall on, and call it, and I don't know if quality is the right word, but in age and kind of the condition of those properties. So this is all kind of data collected throughout the city compared to regional data as well. But with this, we're also able to kind of map these conditions throughout the city to see how, West Mesa compares to East Mesa in terms of home price, affordability, condition of housing stock. So we are in the process of compiling all that data right now. So we have some kind of preliminary results to share with you, which are the next few slides. So one thing that we've heard when we've gone out to the public is a lot about, housing and affordability, and the feedback that we get really ranges. So, one of it is that Mesa is affordable right now, as that's the perception from the city, is that Mesa is, we see ourselves as a very affordable city, but also the concern and desire to make it remain affordable so that our kids can afford to purchase a house and stay and live here in Mesa. So this slide here shows the median home prices for the last several years in comparison to our surrounding jurisdictions. And as we can see, Mesa is by far kind of the more affordable place to live in the valley. So not too far behind Phoenix, but still one of the most affordable places. So how do we continue to provide that affordability, but also look at ways to provide different housing choices for all kind of spectrums of needs?
Rachel, on this, is this based on the census grabbing the assessor's costs as far as housing? Because I'm wondering if it also makes sense to add, what's the reality of cost, right? Of what is it to buy a house? Because usually the assessor's kind of pricing as a note to make sure that we understand kind of where the market is at, right? Because I think 269 seems low, but I understand this is the assessor's kind of potentially like taxable kind of cost, right? But is there data that makes sense to apply? What's the actual market rate of housing right now? Because this is a little tricky, I think, based on people's perceptions of, all right, I can't find anything that's $269,000 in Mesa, right? It's like 300, but I know it's
The date, though, also.
2017 to
Yeah, so I think
to 21.
just the
And then 22.
the values increased in the
Increased the,
2 years. I think the question, I always tell people, don't get caught up on the absolute numbers. It's
Sure.
the relative numbers.
Yeah.
Because most likely all these numbers have risen, right? And so,
everybody.
and you're right, because no one can find, can you find a home for 269? Probably not. But the real point is, how do we compare
Sure.
to the other markets around us? If ours has increased, which most likely it has, we would say the same for everything in the valley. I think one thing we have to be careful with, I was reminding people, the market doesn't really recognize borders too much.
Yeah.
It's kind of, the economy kind of works across the entire system. And so it's just more of a propensity of where a lower cost, homes would be found.
Sure.
But we could, there may be some other data sets we could look at. I know one of the things we could do is pull up the assessor's number based on the total aggregate of value for communities. Now that throws everything in there. So there's some other ways maybe to try to get there.
Yeah, I'm just going, as we plan, for planning purposes, understanding what's the kind of the set data where we get from census, assessor, but also the realities of what's the true market price that people are confronting, because I think that's where the public, when they see these numbers, is like, no, that's not, what are you guys basing it off, right?
Right.
So it's a hard kind of, when we're talking to the public about these things, that I think it's important to have this kind of data as a baseline, but understanding maybe as a planning piece for us is that, these markets fluctuate and how that is impacting our families, right? And our communities on these housing pieces, right? So
Yeah, so Mayor, Vice Mayor Heredia, you're right. So what we have in front of you is just a snapshot solely of median home prices. So part of the work that is being done right now with the housing needs assessment, it does start to tie those pieces together. So we then kind of look at, there's different measures about affordability. So we start looking at the area median income. And HUD has different parameters about how they classify low income, extremely low income, et cetera. And they have specific numbers about, based on that, based on, you know, the number of rooms in a house, what's affordable for these different kind of categories. So then we can see, well, based on that information, what would be, you know, the affordable housing price for the average family in Mesa. So that's all the detail that's being looked at right now and analyzed. It's just, we are not at that point yet to come and bring that forward to council. So this is just some of the preliminary information.
But we can go look and see if there's some more real-time market data that we could pull from more of a real estate. It wouldn't be a census number, right? Because they're always lagging. It'd have to be some listing of recent sales in the last year or so. The sample wouldn't be as big, but we could at least look at a comparative. So we could say, you know, in the last year, the home purchased in Mesa cost X, and then we could kind of do that kind of comparison.
maybe just reference it as a real time.
There you go.
Kind
It
of
could just be
piece,
another
right? Just
point
another
of
point of
reference
data.
in here. We can do that.
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
do that.
I don't want to take too much time, but I do just want to make a comment on the average pricing that I know we're comparing to other communities, and we've always been the more affordable place to live. But data has shown, especially after 22, when prices really skyrocketed, that there are more higher increases on the lower priced homes as far as percentage, a higher percentage of increase on the value because of the pressure on it. Many people, in order to survive the market and inflation and everything that's going on in our economy, they are not moving up, you know, they are moving down. And it's putting a lot of pressure on the rents and the lower priced homes, so the values are shooting up a higher percentage than if it was a home double that price, which has a more moderate increase. So even though we have become the more affordable place, I really question our numbers in comparison to the other surrounding communities, because we've had more upward pressure because of that motion. So the market is really disrupted from historical trends, and if we can get some information on 22 especially, I think that
We'll have to see if Mesa's unique. I don't know that, there may be some places, pockets, but I think, again, it's a market across, there's a lot of people that come into this market are just looking for what they can afford. So we can go pull that, but I think we'll have to look and see if that disruption is unique to Mesa, or how was it affected across the entire set of comparisons, but we can look at that.
Okay, so moving on to rental prices. So we looked at the median home price. So for median rental, once again, fairly affordable in comparison to surrounding jurisdictions. Interestingly, you'll see that Phoenix's, their rent prices are a little bit lower than Mesa's. But just once again, just kind of a snapshot of where we are today. There's a lot of more analysis that goes into this that's being conducted. Another kind of data point that we like to show you is kind of the proportion of our housing stock that's been built over year. So what you see on the screen before you, that red line, maroon line, that's Mesa, and the gray line is Maricopa County in general. So you can see over time, this shows the proportion of the homes in Mesa that were built over the different decades. We had, you know, a boom in the 80s there, and that was kind of out of character in comparison to Maricopa County as a whole, where they remained steady. But then we've kind of fallen back in the similar trend recently to the rest of the valley as far as the number of housing being built. So, and looking at prices again, this shows the number of housing units per housing price. So going back to the conversation about when we start digging into and analyzing what's our, median income and what is considered affordable for our residents, we can then look at our existing housing stock and say, where would we maybe need to try to influence an increase in the number of housing units to meet those needs of the people, but then also looking at the various different levels as well, because we also want to provide housing for all types. So if there is a lack of higher end executive housing, then there's less available for people to live here in Mesa. So do we need to try to increase that as well?
What's the snapshot as far as time, as far as, what is this looking at? Yeah.
Yeah. So we have one of our consultants on the line, Susie Becker. She's with ZPFI. So she might be able to, Susie, are you able to tell us what year this data is from?
Yes, this is from the most recent year that's available based on the county assessor data. I don't know if Seth and Alex have anything to add on that. Seth was great in putting this all together for us, but it's the most recent data we can get from your county assessor.
Susie,
which should be 2022 data. Oh, I'm still muted.
the other ones for the ACS, that's the American Community Survey, that's part of the census. Those 5-year estimates, that's the latest data set that they do for the 5-year estimates. So the American Community Survey gets done in between the actual official census years. So they provide estimates, and the 5-year, that's the latest current data. Okay, so next steps with the Balanced Housing Master Plan. So it's completing this housing needs assessment and inventory. So this is currently being drafted and under review by staff. And then beginning in the summer here, we'll actually start kind of drafting the actual plan and policies. Once again, going out to a lot of the same community meetings for the general plan. We like to try to join up on those so that we're not fatiguing our community with a lot of different outreach events. So coming back to you likely after a break with some point with an update on where we are with this. And with that, any questions?
Ms. Pillsbury.
I am a little passionate about housing, so I've been really anxious to see this, and Chris knows, or Mr. Brady knows, because I've been asking him a lot of questions, and he keeps saying, wait for the balanced housing plan. So I have put a lot of my patience into this plan, and I'm still just not even seeing anything close to what I'm looking for. So maybe this isn't it, but what I want to know is how many units do we have? How many units are currently under construction? How many units have been approved? How many units do we still need? How many units short are we? Like, I just really would love to see concrete numbers. Can I expect that from this? Is this something, I mean, when you talk about inventory of stock, that's what you're talking about?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury. So that's exactly what this housing needs assessment and inventory is that's being worked on right now. So those are all the numbers that will be available once it's finished being drafted and reviewed by staff.
I feel like as a council, like those are the kind of data points that would really help me to make decisions moving forward when we're doing rezoning and when we're looking at what we need. I mean, I think I haven't seen like a large development of single family homes in the time that I've been here because everyone wants to do apartments right now. And I think we need more of that. I mean, like, I can make guesses on certain things and stuff, and obviously we can't say like, you know, this is what we want, this is what we need. The developers are gonna come in and decide that. But just as we're making decisions on rezoning, I need a lot more information so I know how to move forward on things.
And we can get, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, we can give you the information. I think, here's why I caution again, is that the dynamics of the numbers in the last 9 months, as far as single-family home trends, are dynamically different than they were 3 years ago. So I think we're going to have to show you over a period of time, right? Because if we say, oh, well, in the last 9 months, there's only been a handful of homes permitted, well, that's that's the nature of the economy we're going through right now. We are way down. I think at one point I thought we were 80% down from last year as far as single-family home permits. Multifamily homes, we've certainly seen that continue to grow. So I think we're gonna have to look at over a period of time and say, you know, over this period of time, we've seen this much in single family, this much in multifamily. But it's always a dynamic that continues to change. I don't know, it's year to year, but certainly there are ups and downs in all those types of forms.
Yeah, for sure. So I wouldn't expect that we look at data for the last 9 months and make decisions based
Right.
on that, or even the last 2 years or something, because obviously we're making decisions for the next 10 years. So, you know, and you guys are the experts, so I know that you think about this. I just don't even have any clue where we're at. I just really don't. And I'm sure it's probably hard to come up with, like, you know, I hear Mesa's short 27,000 units. Like, I hear numbers being thrown out there. How do people know that? What are they guessing? What are they going off of, right? And is that an accurate thing for me to think, or are we not even close? So that's just where I'm needing some more
Yeah,
information.
and council member, we usually, what we'll do is we'll do the housing spectrum, various income ranges, and then look at the gap in housing supply based on each one of that sort of housing spectrum, lower end, but also to the higher end, which is going to be a little bit different in this plan because you may actually find out that you have some gaps on the higher end if you start projecting forward. The trickier part is, you know, housing, what's in the pipeline is the trickier part where that data gets a little loose, and I think you just had that discussion, so.
Well, especially because I know of 2 developments that we approved that have already fallen through, right? So, I mean, it's not a guarantee that just because we approve something, we're gonna see those units on the market in 2 years or something. So I get the complexity of that.
Yeah, very good, and that is the end result. I mean, that's the same data I look for. There's a long report, show me the gap, where's our gaps, both now and in the future, at all income ranges.
I think on the housing needs assessment and inventory, you list current housing inventory pieces. I think the other pieces to include is also like transportation, right? We have light rail coming along Main Street. We have also redevelopment zones, especially in West Mesa, right? Where those housing strategies look different from other parts of from Mesa, right? So, you know, doing further analysis on how we layer those pieces that we have as tools in the city, because I think there's options to build further density in West Mesa, right? Not necessarily in East Mesa, that strategy probably doesn't work, but in West Mesa for sure. But I think looking at those different types of tools that we have currently at these locations help us understand how housing kind of can be looked at in the future in the city. So I think that's important to look at, you know, these transportation areas, these redevelopment areas, and how we build specific housing strategies that I think work in conjunction with the already planned pieces that already have in the books for us, right? And so that's important also to add to the variables here as we look at how we build housing for the future.
Well, and maybe in our plan, we have to be, to the council's point, is acknowledge that the patterns, the broad statement of housing can be very different in the infill, developed parts of the community versus areas where there's still open areas to build into.
Hi there. So I have some data for Councilmember Spilsbury. So in January of 2022, there were 253 single-family home building permits taken out in 2022. In 23, there were 20, a 92% drop. You were pretty close. But still, and even my district in D1, there are about 620 single-family homes being built. But those homes priced are at a minimum of $600K and up. And there are some apartments being built, if they get built, that we've approved, you know, and that rental income is still high. So I guess my point is just looking at the data and make sure we could make informed decisions on everything, because we have different, like Vice Mayor said, we have different areas of the city that developers are concentrating in for development, and some work out really well, but we have some declining neighborhoods too. that need to be reinforced and built up. And those are probably more our medium home values, is our declining neighborhoods, that they can be some gentrification to them and then, brought back to their glory days like when they were built. So thanks.
Yeah, and just Mayor Council, again, when we use Maricopa County assessor's numbers, they're not going to be the same number that you're negotiating with a realtor, because it doesn't show, that's not how it shows up. And so even when we come to you in the next week or so with the secondary property tax, we're not going to get, we don't talk about the value that people sold their homes at. Even the median home value that is applied, the tax rate is applied to, is you're going to go, you can't buy a home for that price, you're right. But that's what the taxable value is. And that's what we have to, we kind of use that because that's the consistent number across all jurisdictions in Maricopa County. So I just caution there's going to be this number, the retail number you see, and then there's going to be a Maricopa County assessor number, and they will be different. And your assessor number, even in years where you're hearing retail values, growing by 10% or 15%, it can't grow by more than 5% a year. And so I know there's kind of, because you're not paying your mortgage on the assessed value, you're paying it on the market value. So we've got to figure out how to reconcile those, but the source also is going to kind of dictate what these numbers look like, and there may be a little disconnect with the sell value, you know what I'm saying? So we'll see if we can try to find ways to give you multiple views of all that, but just the sources are also driving kind of maybe this disconnect between what we hear on the retail side versus what we're reporting here.
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate the 5%. So on the assessor value, you can't increase any more than 5% in a given year. So whatever has historically been is still going to be reflected in the future, even though it's not occurring now. I mean, the price of homes from 2017 to today has increased 66%. And like I said, more pressure on the lower income. So I don't think it's proportionally the same as it's been historically. And so there's a kind of disconnect there.
Great, I think, yes,
Just
Ms.
one more.
Goforth.
But I would agree with, I would say, the point of this is the comparative analysis, really, when it comes down to it, right? And so all those things affect every municipality. And then, can you tell me, this one I did not go back. Is there a current balanced housing master plan? Okay, so this is the first time we've done this?
Well, we have a housing master plan, right? It was done in 2017?
It's the initial date together.
Yeah, it didn't.
But it's not a plan.
Mayor, council members, so there was an effort that was started in 2017 where the
Okay.
data collection was done, but that never was finalized and brought to council for adoption.
And so I just want to make sure I understand, other than, the zoning, walk me through why a balanced housing plan, master plan, and when we get to the end, the recommendations for achieving housing needs. Because to the mayor's point, there's only, we don't build houses, but so just maybe a little bit, walk me through that part.
Mm-hmm. So even though we aren't the developers, we still know that this is an important issue, and there's ways that the city can influence that through policy, through land use. So when we're talking about a lot of these decisions and we're looking at the redevelopment areas and places, it's how do we use the data that we're seeing in this balanced housing plan with what we want to, where we want to get to, and how do we merge those with other policies as far as land use to try to encourage the development in certain areas? So yes, we may start looking at in redevelopment areas, how can we support infill there and increase density along transit lines? So it's really looking at we as a city, what we can do policy-wise to accomplish that, but also providing that information to the community overall and getting their feedback about what they want and need as far as housing in the city.
So this plan will be more specific than the general plan that just says this should be residential. I mean, we are making recommendations.
That is correct. So yeah, so in the general plan, there is a housing element, but it's gonna be pretty general. So we understand there's so much nuance and importance to this. So that's why it is a separate plan that gets really specific into the details.
I think if you look at the last plan, it specifically talked about building more executive housing, that Mesa felt like it was way behind on the executive housing. And so how does a council influence that? You do it through zoning. You require larger lots, right? You don't allow, you kind of minimize, you maximize lot sizes and don't allow for smaller sizes, and that will increase the value of homes. And so there are ways through zoning you can kind of influence that scale, I think, a little bit.
I think also that the importance of transportation and land use is, I mean, so will we see you kind of address that as far as its connection to housing and, okay.
Yeah, so Mayor and Councilmember Goforth, that's why it's so important that this is being done at the same time as those other plans, because we're looking at the current data for all of these aspects, and we can kind of coordinate them, and it is a very layered approach. So yes, that is very much part of it. It's looking at transit, it's looking at all of our different redevelopment areas, our land use decisions that we're making as part of the general plan and these other specific plans.
So when you present, and this is it, sorry, when you present in the future, can you add those elements so that we can understand how you're looking at the whole, those influences?
Absolutely. This is just a first. We haven't been in front of council yet to give you an update. So we wanted to get before you and tell you, where we are at in the process, what's being done. But we will definitely be back before you with more detail. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, just to add to the use of the balanced housing plan, one of the things that we do is, as we see population growth in our city and we look at our various land use allocations, the balanced housing plans help us. As Mr. Brady said, if we have to do a rezoning, example, if we're rezoning from commercial to residential, we have to see the balance of our land use allocation and see where the needs are, so we can have a balanced city to maintain our commercial, residential, so we have a uniform balance in our city.
True, but as it sits now, it's so broad and unspecified. So this will be, I mean, we need to drill down further.
And frankly, as not as suggested, some might argue or make a point, if you look at the land use in Mesa, it is tilted significantly in favor of residential. So it's not just the types of residential within Mesa, it's in context of commercial and open space and industrial, right? And so it's not just a balance of affordable versus executive housing, it's also, well, how much housing versus commercial, supportive retail, commercial versus job centers should you have? That was a big theme in the last master plan. And so those are, or not master plan, sorry, general plan. So those are all things we have to bring into conversation.
I feel like that is where it would help if we had an identity. If we decided, and I know we're all not going to agree on it, so that's probably why.
That's why we don't address it, yeah.
Right. No, I know. Like, we all probably have a different idea of what our identity should be, but like, is Mesa the place where you can afford to live? And so a lot of great families come here because we have education, we have jobs, we have great transportation, we have incredible parks and amenities, whatever, but we have places to live. Is that our identity? If it's not, I mean, I wouldn't just like, I get your point, but I don't know that we want to go take out some of those housing spaces, because I think that's what Mesa is known for.
No, I was just suggesting that there's a tendency to take out commercial and put in residential.
You mean like as we're rezoning and stuff?
And is that's the balance I'm talking about.
And that like currently as sits, we have a lot of residential space in our city. It goes back to the where do you put it?
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Summers, go ahead.
First of all, I'm back. Thank you very much. Just to bounce off Councilmember Goforth and Mr. Brady's point, it is important that we have a balance of housing and jobs. And that was something that we focused on 10 years ago, because one identity that I do not want to see for Mesa is Mesa's the place you live and then get in your car and drive 45 minutes to work in some other community and then 45 minutes back, because an hour and a half in the car to get to work every day, Monday through Friday, that you take hits on your quality of life. So it's important that we both protect and maximize our commercial, industrial job space as part of this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Is homelessness an issue that's discussed at all in our balanced housing master plan?
Mayor, there will be a little bit of that touched in it, and it is part of the housing needs and assessment, that data as well that we're looking at.
Is there another category in the general plan that would address that? I don't know, I'm just asking. I don't know if is it a housing issue or is it a social service?
Yeah, just a note, some communities choose to touch lightly on homelessness within their general plan. Some communities choose not to. It's such a sensitive subject that sometimes it's integrated and sometimes it's separated out. So we'll have to work through that together. To just being in full transparency, most communities struggle with this. It's a byproduct of being a successful city in some ways. But a very, very important issue was mentioned quite a bit, both in the positive on let's make sure that we're sensitive and move forward on positive actions, but also some concerns over it as well from the public. So we'll have to work through it as we go forward.
Well, I think we have a strategic homelessness plan and the pathways to housing recovery plan. So, and I don't know if every other community does. So it seems to me that it would be odd to have that plan and not have it be a part of the master plan.
We could maybe acknowledge it and reference it.
Yeah. Or it could be front and center, you know, in the document. I mean, I think we need to, I don't know why we would act like it's something that we aren't anxious to share. When did we come up with the phrase balanced housing master plan? I like it, but I just don't remember. It was kind of we used to have a housing master plan. Now we have a balanced housing master plan. I think it's great.
I couldn't answer, Mayor, but I'll just say that I like the term as well because it deals with all spectrums of housing.
Yeah.
But I'll turn it over.
Is that a Mesa thing, or is this?
Who wants to take credit?
Mayor, yeah.
No.
No, don't take credit.
Okay.
No, I like not sitting here.
Yeah.
I like when I can enjoy sitting at the back. So this came up in 2017 when we started looking at a housing plan for the city. And the perception that it was creating was this is more geared towards affordable housing. And we said that's not the case. We're trying to look at all the housing needs of various type of residents in the city. And so we came up and we looked at other jurisdictions that we've worked and are familiar where they've tackled that through a balanced housing plan to create that balance between all income groups and all variety of housing. So that's how we came up with that word.
So this is a Mesa thing. It's not that the state changed the statute and said going forward you're going to call it this instead of that. Okay, that's great. I think it helps us. It's good to be reminded where we're at relative to other communities and the balance. Obviously, housing inflation has hit here much harder than other parts of the country, and being affordable is relative, right? We're a lot less affordable than we were a few years ago, but we still are relatively more affordable than other communities in our region. So I think reminding ourselves that we want a balanced housing stock is important. I would absolutely, I embrace our reputation of being the affordable community, so don't want to lose that. But at the same time, I don't think it's our responsibility to be the solution to all, to housing affordability for the entire valley. And I think we need a balanced housing stock in Mesa. So
we're going to give you credit for the title now.
Thank you. Nana, write that down, will you? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We'll look forward. I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussion on this.
Somebody asked that question.
Yeah.
He's the answer.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Item 1B is a presentation and to receive an update on Mesa's community electric vehicle charging plan.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Ian Linson. I'm an assistant to the city manager. I heard you were discussing plans, so I thought I'd discuss another plan with you. Thanks for the opportunity. So yeah, as you mentioned, wanted to provide a quick update on our community electric vehicle plan. This, just for some background, just to bring us back, this is part of the Mesa Climate Action Plan. It's an effort of that initiative. And it furthers 3 out of the 4 goals that the plan aspires to achieve. Prepares us for a climate-ready community, can help assist with, I should say vehicle electrification does this, should help assist with renewable energy and carbon neutrality. But it really, so vehicle electrification is a 2-pronged approach. We are doing it in that way. We're looking at our own municipal fleet and operations, but that's only a very small sliver of the vehicles that are on the road in Mesa today. So then we are also, and what this plan is focusing on, going out to the community and seeing both what is happening today and how we can really be ready for what's coming, and then maybe even, based on what the plan finds, help accelerate some of that adoption of electrification out in the community. And so we really do have to look to the community to make progress on those 3 goals identified in the plan, because if we just did it by ourselves, or if it was just a few organizations that did it, we really wouldn't be able to achieve those goals. So you may recall back in early March, you all had a chance to visit with the consultant that's working with us on this, Kimley Horn. So they came in and kind of gave a very quick snapshot. We've continued to make progress, and here are kind of the things that we've been doing. As I mentioned, so we're benchmarking the current EV usage in Mesa. We went out and solicited community feedback, much like the general plan folks did. And it's a happy coincidence, actually, that they presented before me. But because I do want to give a shout out to Jeff Robbins and the team, we piggybacked on a few of their community events. So I really appreciate being able to do that so we weren't flooding folks with questions out there. And then really the lion's share of the work that is ongoing right now is we're taking a look at all of the data that our consultant has access to, that we have access to as a city, that could potentially impact current EV adoption and future trends. And we're going to analyze that and see how we can, if the city has a role in affecting those outcomes in some way. And then, another happy coincidence, in the middle of this, the federal government decided to drop their charging and fueling infrastructure grant, which is a pretty exciting opportunity for us because it is the first time that Mesa gets to directly apply for federal funds related to EV charging. So you might have heard a lot of talk about federal dollars for EV charging. This is the first time we can apply directly, so we're going to take advantage of that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But then the ultimate goal of the plan, as I've said already 3 times, I'll say it the 4th time, we want to identify gaps that are out there in the community that maybe aren't being addressed. So one of the other trends that we're taking a look at is what is the market doing or planning on doing? And so are there some gaps that still need to be filled that the city potentially could step into? So some current stats. I don't know about you, and maybe it's just because I think about EVs all the time now, but I see electric vehicles all the time when I'm driving. I just can't help it. And I'm a little bit jealous because I want one. But so there's about 3,200 in Mesa. This is a little bit old data. It's from a year or so ago. That number just continues to go up. The percentages are crazy when you look at them. In Arizona, total about 40,000 are registered. This is an interesting number. So we are the 6th state by share of EVs per 1,000 people. So that's pretty impressive. I didn't think about that when I first started this whole thing. But so Arizona kind of punches above its weight when it comes to EVs. The other states that are ahead of us are some of the ones that you might have thought of, like California and Washington and Hawaii, but then we're right up there with them. So on the community outreach piece, we did attend 4 community events. We also have a Mesa Listens page, so that is the place to be, where folks can check out information on this topic. We plan to have it up there indefinitely. So as this progresses, we will continue to update that page. It'll be a go-to spot. We also, that was the location of a survey that we launched. Hopefully you guys got a chance to see that. We shared it pretty highly out there on social media. We did an interactive map I'll touch on. We got over 500 survey responses, which is pretty good when it comes to surveys. Again, I'd like it to be closer to 500,000 responses, but 500, I'll take it. A cool tool we were able to use on the Mesa Listens page was kind of where would you like your own EV charger map? And so this is kind of hard to see, I know, but all of the circles represent, if you drill down on them, it represents locations that members of the public said they would like an EV charger. There are some very dark green spots here that show existing chargers, which aren't very many. But what was interesting to me is it almost really matched our grid system. And so kind of the thought process out there was folks wanted convenient charging, likely to where they lived or to where they looked. So we're definitely going to take this into consideration as we formulate thoughts around that. But that was an interesting activity. And then just tons and tons of data analysis still. So really, a lot of this is going to depend very much on utility infrastructure, both existing and planned out there in the future. So I'm talking electric facilities and capacity and that sort of thing. Obviously, we as a city would need to look to our own resources within our electric service territory, but we've had a lot of really great productive conversations with SRP on this topic, which would then be, the rest of the city would kind of take care of that. And then just kind of looked at all the other spots that are out there, city-owned spots, parks, places people would go. It's kind of this idea of let's meet people where they're at, so we're not forcing them to go to a different location. So taking a look at all that. Bunch of other stuff, could bore you with this, but it just wanted to show kind of the intensity that we're taking to this data analysis. One of the things to point out, and I'll mention it, I think, on the next slide, multifamily units, which we've already identified as probably one of the biggest challenges right now, since it's going to be more difficult for those folks to access charging. Trip volumes, access to freeways, underserved neighborhoods, that sort of thing. That's underserved neighborhoods, a key component of the federal grant. Some really interesting trends are starting to emerge when we're looking at this, highlighted kind of here on these data sets. So the darker areas are where these data units are more intense. So multifamily, more intense as you would expect kind of here in the downtown area of West Mesa. The middle map, we call it fast charging emphasis. That's really where trips are happening. Either they're heading to or they're coming out of. Again, interestingly enough, in the west side of Mesa, maybe along the 60-ish. And then this idea, interesting idea of public fleet emphasis. So this is, think of like your mom and pop contractor, landscaper, somebody's got a plumbing business. They want to electrify their vehicles, but they don't have a fleet yard. They park their vehicle in their house, but they still would like access to charging. We were kind of identifying where most of those uses take place. Again, a lot of activity we're seeing on the west side. Well, just to sum that up. So again, taking all that data is going to go into the ultimate analysis of. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I just had a question. So tell me this again. So the darker areas are best opportunities for these different things?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
Mayor and Councilmember Goforth. Yes, they've been labeled as best opportunities because it's where the activity is the most. It's the densest. We're seeing, so on the multifamily side, we're seeing the most density in multifamily where we have identified as the best use for EV, because that's one of the most significant challenges for a multifamily tenant. They don't have a garage, they can't put in their own 220 outlet, so some sort of public charging would probably make the most sense in that area. Same with fast charging, which is where the trips are. Okay. That's where most of the trips either start from or end. And so again, the idea is if the vehicle is assumed to have been parked in that area for some point of time, probably makes sense to have charging in and around that area, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're actually using all of that data now. We're in an interesting position in terms of this grant because we're further along than probably some communities are in that we've already started to think about this. We've started to collect data. So we've got a very compelling case that we can make for this grant. But we're not all the way at the end. So we don't have the total story. We don't have direction. We don't have a full picture of where we want to be. So this grant provides up to $15 million to municipalities to have some role in charging. That role can be really anything. We could partner with the private sector on it. We can do it ourselves. We can install it and leave it, that sort of thing. So sky's kind of the limit. So the way that we're focusing this grant is to be specific enough that we remain competitive, but also still general so that when direction finally, when we finally get direction, we can go ahead and implement that. But we've got some exciting ideas on what we're looking to do. We see basically 3 types of charging, some neighborhood charging focused around the West Mesa area, as I kind of mentioned, some fast charging that was compliant with some of the past federal grants that we weren't able to go after, maybe along kind of the US 60 corridor and where the 202 kind of meets. And then some charging that would be tailored towards, but not solely used for the public fleet, so kind of the mom and pop commercial guys. And we'll be applying for this in just a couple of weeks. And so then it'll be a few months to analyze that, and we'll get feedback from there. Okay, so next steps, we're gonna keep doing our analysis, identify those gaps, and then we'll come to you at probably after you get back from break around the September-ish time with some proposals. Say this is kind of what we've seen, and here are some thoughts as to how we might go about addressing it. And again, it could have something to do with charging itself, or it could have something to do with how charging is facilitated through private sector, or through, are there some regulations that either would make sense or don't make sense? And so that'll be packaged for you in September.
Thank you, Ian. Ms. Duff.
I see that we're applying for the grant, which is great. When do they make the announcement on the awards? Is that?
So Mayor and Councilmember Duff, I actually, unfortunately, I don't know that the date off the top of my head. They just moved the submission back by about 4 weeks. I don't know why. So that kind of changed everything. I know it's sometime within the next 6 months or so is when they should be notifying applicants.
Great. And then I just had one question on the page, number 7. It says data analysis and a lot of dots on there.
Yeah.
And a lot of green dots. And the key says it's park. So I just wanted to understand what is that?
Yeah, so Mayor and Councilmember Duff, so yeah, those are city parks. And just this map was just an example of kind of all of the
Really? Not that many.
assets that we remember. Mr. Hirschberg had a very innovative idea of turning a lot of our green spaces into parks, and so we do have a lot of parks, which is great. And so those are city-owned areas, right, that we have potentially more control of. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's ultimately where charging is going to be recommended. It's just a snapshot of some facilities that we have. But again, going back to the utility piece, it also has to come down to, is there electrical infrastructure around there that could support some charging?
So parks would probably also include the retention areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I first thought
Yeah.
of parks, but I get it now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have a few, Ian, and I appreciate your hard work on this, and you and I have had several discussions on this, but I think I agree with you. I see a lot more electric vehicles on the road every day. I'm really taken back by how the increase is very obvious, and with the price points of these vehicles coming down, I think it's, you don't need a crystal ball to see that we really need to prepare the infrastructure of our neighborhoods and our communities to respond to that. Multifamily, it seems like we see a lot of projects come through and they say, oh yes, look, we've allocated these 3 or 4 spaces, in this 500 unit apartment complex for electric vehicle charging. And it just seems like, wow, 5 years from now, people are gonna be really mad that there's only 3. Is there some thought given, do city planners have an idea as to how we were gonna go about changing the allocation of how many, the next time we build an apartment complex, can we suggest they might need more than 3 electric vehicle charging stations?
Well, I can jump in real quick just on the thoughts that we've had in this project, which is, yes, we've talked about that. And does it make sense to, if not have chargers, have it be charger ready? So you have conduit or something.
Right, maybe the electrical's there, and as the demand increases, they can, I see Mary nodding her head. Give me some reassurance on that.
So one of the things we can look at, Mayor, council members, one of the things we can look at as we move forward with EVs and how they're evolving in the future is not only having the spaces there, but as Ian said, having them EV ready. And so that conduit is there so that as more and more electric vehicles come into place, it's as simple as putting those chargers into those places. So that is something that we.
So let me just caution. As a organization that is moving towards creating, electric vehicle charging stations for its own fleet, conduits, you can cut up asphalt any day. It's bringing the power to these locations. That's the expense, and that's the challenge, and how to bring that additional source of power into wherever you're locating, you're trying to get it to, and you don't want to spread it out because that just creates more cost. So I think it's that strategy of like, if you're in an SRP territory, like how do they work with SRP to figure out, okay, at some point in the future, or how we're going to get that additional power here? I mean, that's the biggest lift for us. And eventually, even after we have a plan, just being able to figure out the equipment and bringing that power into that site. It's not just getting this, the conduit. It is literally the source of power and converting that into that site. So we need to keep having this discussion, Mayor, because it does lend itself to, I think, what I'm hearing is more congregating these opportunities as opposed to having them kind of scattered throughout, because I think just the infrastructure and the power demand at least lends itself to trying to create. I think that's where Ian is trying to help us get to, is these, I don't know, I'm using the word congregate, I'm not sure what word you're using.
Hubs.
These where you have where you can bring, set it up for many of them can come together versus trying to spread them out too far. I think that's kind of the current philosophy. Am I wrong on that?
So especially from the city's standpoint, that makes a lot of sense right now. I can tell you SRP is absolutely thinking about this too, and how do they accommodate that going forward. One just really interesting aside that we've learned just from talking with SRP is it happens that in some of our older multifamily properties, they were sized for an electric use that they don't use anymore because of modern appliances and reductions in electricity use. So we're here, and again, this is maybe anecdotal, but there are a few of these facilities that actually could support some chargers today. But that doesn't help new builds and things like that will come online that definitely have to think through all of that. I hate to put those recommendations forward, but the idea is still of conduit being there incrementally priced in the beginning still can make sense. It's not going to solve the problem, though, of getting the electricity there at the end of the day, necessarily.
Stuff.
On new builds, do we have anything or will be putting anything into our code of saying like 20% of the spaces need to be equipped for EV?
It'd be up to the council to make that decision.
So Mayor and Councilmember, I'm hoping to have recommendations like that to present to you.
A lot of cities are taking that measure.
Yeah, so we would have to change our code.
Yeah.
Require any multifamily at a certain level to do that.
Or even single family, yeah.
Or single,
Yeah.
Rachel, do you have something to add to
good
that?
luck getting elected.
Mayor, I just wanted to clarify that in our current zoning regulations, we do not have anything that requires them, but as mentioned, that's something that we could look into through text amendments. But we also can try to encourage the location of these through our planned area development overlays and bonus intensity zone overlays as, justification for high quality developments when they're asking for modifications. So that's something that staff has been having conversations with people about already, but just wanted to add that in.
I propose building it into our building code, adding it to, doing the text amendment to put it in our, it is the way of the future, and we have to. I mean, we are doing all of this, right? And so if something got built last year, we're still looking at the inventory, how we're gonna get electric. Like, well, maybe we could incorporate that now. So I would be in support of that.
I would too. I think it's clear that that's going to, we're underbuilding multifamily if we don't know a plan for what we know is going to occur. And what you're saying, that you're condemning the people that live there that are going to own electric vehicles to going to fast charging stations that might be miles away. I'm like, well, just like going to gas stations, but again, it's a bigger commitment because that means they're going to spend 20 minutes of, every couple of days parked at a fast changing station. So I would encourage us, and hopefully other communities have kind of plowed this for us and we can look into it. But that seems like something I'd love to see. Similarly, at home, I think most people with electric vehicles, they're charged at home. And I think we need to maybe streamline, realize that a lot of people in our community right now, there's electricians, doing side jobs all over town every day, putting in the 220 higher capacity, electrification of garages. And I just wonder that seems like it's a tricky thing, but we probably need a permit for that. We probably need that you could do that improperly and it could be dangerous. So I just wonder if what we're doing to streamline and make user-friendly, or you give some helpful hints to how people can adapt their garages to having fast chargers in their garages. Also, as the public charging stations that we have are difficult to find. Gas stations are ridiculously easy to find, but if you Google, where can I go to charge my vehicle, it'll take you to the back of a parking lot somewhere, and there's no signage, and you think you're on a goose chase. And I wonder if what we can do I'd like to look at signage requirements. Are they difficult to find because we make them difficult to find because the city has rules about we want to hide electric vehicle charging stations? Or
So Mayor, I really hope, I'm putting a lot of expectations, especially on our consultant who's going to write the final draft on this, that I hope that's included in some of the recommendations. I can tell you, just as an aside, in our grant application, we're including funding for signage in there because we agree that it's an important aspect. We don't want to hide this stuff. We want to make it easy to find, and we really want to promote, frankly, the fact that it's easy to charge a vehicle in Mesa because, as I've read and others have talked about, like if a person has an electric vehicle and they need to charge and they need to go eat, they're going to go to the place where they can charge to eat. So that might as well be Mesa rather than sending them somewhere else.
I think a lot of these problems are going to find solutions because I've heard like Walmart and some of that, they want to be, they're clued into how to make money. And so it might be a year or two from now, it's silly that we were debating this because, but on the other hand, I just don't know.
Just real quick comment on that, Mayor. So we're definitely taking all of that into account here. So the idea is to look at what the private sector is planning on doing because we don't want to supplement or reinvent the wheels, I've said before, in that area. So if Walmart is going to do everything, and I talked with a vendor who claims he's working with all the Walmarts here in Mesa, so it's great because then we don't have to do it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Look forward to hopefully us winning this grant and having more discussions on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next topic, I think, is going to have a lot of discussion, so why don't we take a break? Let's report back at 9:15, if that's all right, or as close there too, and we'll...
Cut into our discussion time, if people have to leave. So I'd say like a 5-minute break.
Let's go with 9:15, because I think there's some necessities that we need to deal with. All right, welcome back, everyone. I think I know we've got plenty more to go on this meeting. So item 1C is a presentation and to provide direction on proposed changes to the zoning ordinance regarding drive-through facilities. Ladies, thank you for working so hard on this. We appreciate it. Looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Thank you, Mayor Giles, council members. Mary Kopasky-Brown, your planning director, and with me, of course, is Rachel, our assistant planning director. We've been working on some drive-through text amendments as a team, as a city, for probably a little over a year now. And there's been a lot of back and forth with residents, with our development community, with looking at best practices. So what we want to present to you today are some of the findings that we have from some of the research that we've done and some of the things that we've heard both from our development community and our residents. In summary, what we'll do is we'll look at when the project Oh, this is a lot of what I just said, sorry. So we've explored and presented a lot of the alternative concepts based on the feedback that we've gotten from council and from our stakeholders. That, again, includes resident feedback. That is especially through a lot of the emails that we received, a lot of the phone calls that we received, and from the development community and a lot of the public outreach. We've had a series of public outreach meetings within the last 6 months where we really tried to hear what the public is saying about drive-throughs and how to regulate them in the city. One of the things we heard from the developers is that council approval of different types of drive-throughs in different districts would be costly, time-consuming, and arbitrary, that our city goals can be accomplished through design standards, and that the proposed amendments that we had previously brought forward were not in line with what other jurisdictions were doing. So we went and wanted to really understand what the surrounding jurisdictions were doing as it related to where drive-throughs were allowed, what processes were required, and then what were their development standards, so that when we make a recommendation to council, we're making sure that we're in line with what everyone else is doing. Based on the research that we did, we'd like to present our findings today and our recommendations that would help us to align with what those surrounding communities are doing.
Mayor, can I just jump in here? We've been working on this for a long time. And I want to make it very clear, this was not staff initiated. This was brought to us by the council and members of council asking for this. So I just want to be clear, because there are some voices out there in the development community who have taken on these two women in very inappropriate ways and just treated them inappropriately. And so I stopped the process. I stopped the discussion because we were not going to subject these employees to that kind of discussion and that type of debate. We thrive on discussion, but it was getting very inappropriate. So we stopped the outreach. We stopped moving forward, and we stopped and said, okay, let's pause, think about this. And we said, let's do this. Let's go. And I challenged the staff to go back and show us how we compare with other communities, because that seemed to be what everybody wanted to be. And frankly, I think it cuts both ways, that sometimes everybody wants us to be like other cities, but frankly, they don't give us the same kind of development they do in other cities. So it's kind of this odd, we want you to be like other cities and be that easy, but we're not going to bring you the same kind of quality we bring other cities. And so I've challenged the development community, said, listen, if you want us to be like other cities, that's fine, but you've got to treat us like other cities. So I think if we could keep that in mind as we're going through this discussion, I think what you're going to see is the opportunity in this area. Mesa is beyond generous, beyond available for this. And we are going to work very hard to align ourselves on the design standards of other communities. And I get that. I think it helps across all these communities that the rules seem to be the same. But again, I hope we get the same kind of quality on the design side of the quality of development, whether it's a drive-through or any kind of commercial standard, because sometimes that affordability concept that we just talked about in housing, sometimes our development community also thinks that then we can lower the quality of the commercial type of development they bring because they use that as a standard against us. So that's the context in which the city manager gave direction to the city staff that you're hearing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady.
So one of the first things we wanted to look at was what are other jurisdictions doing when it comes to where drive-throughs are permitted and where they require a use permit. Different jurisdictions will call use permits different names. So we call them either council use permit or special use permits based on who is going to approve them. Other jurisdictions will use the word conditional use permit. They're essentially the same process. Approval bodies may change, but we wanted to see as much as we can, because it's not an apples to apples comparison, where we compare with what other jurisdictions are doing. So we looked at Gilbert, we looked at Chandler, we looked at Scottsdale, and we looked at Mesa. So in the town of Gilbert, currently, drive-throughs are allowed in about 9% of the city land area. This is in their community commercial, shopping center, general commercial, regional commercial districts. As just kind of a context, Chandler has a total of 18 zoning districts in their city, and the drive-throughs are allowed by right in 4 of those. With the conditional use permits, they have two districts that it's very clear, and then again, this nuance about if they're in a permitted district, what their hours of operations are. So less than 1% of the city, drive-throughs are allowed with some type of use permit. So overall, 10% of the land area in Gilbert is where you can put a drive-through. Same comparison for Chandler, permitted, they're permitted on 1.4% of the land area in 3 zoning districts. For context, Chandler has a total of 18 zoning districts. So of the 18, they're permitted in 3 of them, and with a use permit, they're allowed in 2. For a total of just a little bit over 5% of the land area in Chandler is where you can put a drive-through. For Scottsdale, they're permitted in 2.3% of the land. Scottsdale has a total of 47 zoning districts. So they're allowed on 2.3% of the land in 5 of those districts. And then with a conditional use permit, it's 1.7% of the land in 2 zoning districts for a total of about 4% of the land area of Scottsdale. When we look at Mesa, currently, drive-throughs are permitted on 21.2% of the land area in Mesa in 5 different zoning districts. For context, Mesa has a total of 39 zoning districts. So between this and where they're conditionally permitted, it's about 26% of our zoning districts would allow for drive-throughs. For a conditional use permit, that would be both the council use permit and the special use permit, it's about 1%. So again, for context, 22% of the land area in the city of Mesa is where you would be able to put a drive-through.
So I think this is where the argument fails, that Mesa is more difficult for drive-throughs than other communities. Visuals are very helpful.
So we went back and kind of put aside the last set of recommendations that we had made and really are coming back with different recommendations for the city council. And that is that we continue to allow drive-throughs in Mesa. There, again, is a narrative out there that we're trying to ban drive-throughs. That's never been the way forward, the direction we received from council. It's never been the way that the staff has been moving forward. We want to create a better alignment with what the other jurisdictions are doing, and we're looking at some vesting options that would be considered for that. And then we want to make sure that through our processes, we're providing improved aesthetics and circulations. So one of our recommendations is to require that use permit or that council use permit, the council level approval of that use permit in our neighborhood commercial areas, which is currently a special use permit, which is approved by the Board of Adjustments, in our planned employment park, our light industrial, and our general industrial. And we specifically called out those areas because that's where we want to really attract businesses and job opportunities, high quality jobs, manufacturing, those types of uses are really what we want in those industrial and in that planned employment park zoning districts. So that's from a process perspective where we are. If we were to make that change, we still have about 22% of the city of Mesa where drive-throughs would be either permitted or permitted with a use permit. You just see the shift is that 7% would be 7% of the land would be permitted, where 15% would have to go through that extra layer of public outreach, the public hearings with the planning and zoning board and with city council to give the neighborhood that opportunity to input into the projects that we're seeing. With that, I'm going to turn it to Rachel, who's going to talk about some of the specific development standards that we saw in the other jurisdiction and how Mesa compares.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So as Mary mentioned in the beginning, one of the main kind of conversations and topics with stakeholders was this desire and suggestion that we look at design standards as a way to kind of regulate drive-throughs. And so we've really done a deep dive into the surrounding jurisdictions and their specific development standards and how they compare to Mesa. And based on that, we're coming forward with some recommendations for you. So the first one of these is screening requirements of the drive-through itself. So on the screen, you'll kind of see a comparison of different cities. So it's a mix across the board. In all of the cities, there's some sort of requirement for screening, either by landscaping or a retaining wall. So currently, the city does have requirements that a drive-through not be located parallel to an arterial street. But we do have an exception that says, well, if there are site constraints that prevent that from happening, then you have to provide a 40-inch screen wall. So what we are recommending is that we retain our current standards and that current requirement, but that we also require additional landscaping and architecturally integrated awnings as well to come out and screen those drive-throughs. And that's more in line what we've seen with other jurisdictions that require enhanced landscaping along those frontages where we have drive-throughs facing arterials. So the next development standard we looked at was our stacking requirements. So these also kind of vary from city to city. So we have requirements for both kind of the stacking in between the drive-through window and where that order menu box is, and then also from where the order menu box is to the entry of the drive-through. And within our standards, we allow those requirements to be deviated through our site plan review process. So looking at other cities, their stacking requirements are pretty similar. They range from 75 feet to 100 feet. And just making sure that we don't have vehicles kind of queuing and overflowing. So what we are recommending is that we retain these current standards that we have as far as stacking, but that we also include requirements for a distance in between the actual drive-through entry lane and the street access, and also that drive-through entry lane and the cross-access drive. Something that we have seen a lot with our developments, and this had come up as a request from our planning and zoning board as well, is that a lot of concern when you have multiple drive-throughs in a commercial center, how that really affects the internal circulation, because you end up having stacking overflowing into your internal driveways and really blocking and creating kind of conflicts in between cars. So this would create a design standard to really try to prevent some of that overflow, both onto our streets and internally within the development. So our next requirement here is about employee screening and protection requirements. So currently the only city that has regulations regarding this is Gilbert, where they require shade structures adjacent to their drive-through lanes and walkways adjacent to their drive-through lanes. And this is specifically for employees that are outside taking orders. So this is very much being an increased kind of operational trend that you see in drive-through facilities, where you have employees out there while cars are queued in line that are taking those orders. But it's a way to look at and providing the safety for those employees. So having some separation from that vehicular traffic, and also just from the elements itself. We live in a very hot climate. So we are proposing that if you have employees out there taking orders, that you would provide a shade structure and also provide a raised pedestrian path for those employees to provide additional safety for them. Next requirement is setbacks from residential. Scottsdale currently has a requirement that a drive-through lane be separated from any single-family zoning district or any zoning district that has kind of uses that are comparable to that, which is 150 feet. We are recommending that we install a 100-foot setback from residential uses to the drive-through lane or our pickup lane. This is to protect those adjacent neighbors from kind of the impacts that drive-throughs would have on their properties. We often hear, we don't hear a lot of complaint until it's directly affecting somebody. And so when we see that is when we have a proposal come in and they have an order menu box that's directly adjacent to their backyard, and what the impact is that on them, having both the cars, the fumes, the noise from those facilities affecting their property. So this is a way to provide some buffer to those residential uses. So the next requirement is a traffic impact study. So currently all the other cities require some sort of traffic impact analysis through their site planning process, and Mesa currently does not, unless our traffic department anticipates some major impacts, they might request that. But you'll see that in Chandler, they require a traffic impact study for any shopping center that's greater than 24,000 square feet or a pharmacy with a drive-through. Gilbert requires a traffic impact analysis with any new site plan application that comes in. Scottsdale Also request what they call transportation impact mitigation analysis for their rezonings, any general plan amendments, or anything that has a use permit. And then based off of that, they would determine if a full traffic study would be required. Staff is proposing that with our drive-throughs that we require a traffic impact study. You'll notice one of the proposals that you're not seeing here today from previous iterations is kind of this concept of the clustering and density requirements. Previously, we had proposed some kind of limitations on the number of drive-throughs that could be located adjacent to one another and within group commercial centers. So kind of based on feedback that we heard from the development community and from what we see in other cities, we think that through our traffic impact study, this would be able to appropriately identify any kind of major traffic concerns that would be generated from possibly an overconcentration of drive-throughs being adjacent to one another, that wouldn't lead us to our recommendation into City Council about their locations. So in summary, staff is proposing a set of standards that one would improve aesthetics of these drive-through facilities through additional screening requirements, improve the circulation, so looking at, once again, how those drive-through lanes function, the circulation both on-site and off-site to reduce the congestion there, ensuring that we have appropriate traffic measures in place through our traffic impact study, and also with that to really look at the pedestrian access, safety, and connectivity both through that traffic impact study and also with our suggestions for measures to protect employees that are taking orders outside. Also, these standards would lessen impacts to residential areas through requiring setbacks from those facilities to those property lines. And once again, improving the urban form through the use of landscaping and buffers to really influence the built form and where you see the number of them versus doing a hard requirement on the number that can be located next to each other. So using design standards instead. And also, the second part of that, as Mary touched on in the first part, would be modifying our approval criteria or approval processes for the different zoning districts to better align with other jurisdictions and the intent of what those zoning districts are for, both in the zoning district itself and in the general plan. So ensuring that our industrial districts are really being used to create and promote jobs, which is their intent. And then also through this, we would also increase public engagement and participation in these proposals. So moving forward, our next steps, based on direction from City Council today, we would go forward and revise these concepts and actually work on the actual text amendment itself. After that, a draft would be provided online for public review. We would probably hold some more public outreach meetings with our stakeholders and then go to Planning and Zoning Board for their recommendation and ultimately back to you for action. So with that, Mary and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We're going to start with Mr. Freeman because I know he has some travel plans that we need to get him to.
Thank you. You know, the presentation, I know there's been a lot of angst. Ms. Spilsbury and I attended some of the public meetings, and they were quite a little bit combative in a way. And I'm really sorry about that because in afterthought, we should have intervened and probably stopped some of the discussion there. But regardless, I just want to confirm that we're not restricting drive-throughs in our city.
That's correct, Councilmember Freeman.
And so with the summary is we're mainly discussing design standards, screening, stacking, impact studies, and some other components there.
Mayor Giles, Councilmember Freeman, yes, the one that you didn't mention were some process changes.
Yeah. And I need to know the difference between a conditional use permit and a council use permit from the other cities. So, and there's different approval methods because I know we have the board adjustment on SUPs and then the council use permit in Mesa.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Freeman, so when we looked at the council use permits for the other jurisdictions, they require city council or their town council approval.
So their conditional use permit is the same as our council use permit?
Essentially, yes.
Gotcha. And that was mainly in the zoning of industrial and what, commercial areas? I can't remember.
Mainly in industrial and also in some kind of downtown and heritage type of districts, yes.
And we currently do not have that?
We currently require we don't allow them in our downtown core district, but then we do have requirements for in the downtown business one, a CUP is required there.
Okay.
And Councilmember Freeman, the special use permit is required in our industrial, neighborhood, commercial, and mixed use. And that's where our recommendation is to, not with the mixed use, but to pull them into the council use permit.
And currently that's done by the Board of Adjustment or?
It can be, yes, it's
Or
either by the Board of
administrative.
Adjustment or by the Planning and Zoning Board if it accompanies a site plan
Okay.
approval.
All right, I'll stop for a moment and let the other council members visit this topic.
Thank you. Ms. Pillsbury.
I'll go with a couple of my questions. I guess, first of all, I feel like the messaging on this hasn't been super clear from the beginning, and we started off the presentation by saying that this wasn't staff-driven, that council asked for this. And I think one of the reasons that some of the council asked for this was because their constituents felt like there were too many drive-throughs in their district. And this was a way to deal with that, which to me, so for us to say we're not trying to restrict drive-throughs, that feels exactly what the point of this was, because council members were feeling like they were having too many drive-throughs in their district, so we need to restrict drive-throughs. And I think that we can say we're not trying to ban drive-throughs, we can say we're not trying to restrict drive-throughs. I think all of this will do that, which I think was the point of why certain council member in particular wanted this done. I guess one of my questions, I'm concerned with can you go to the proposed City of Mesa map? Right there. I'm concerned with the 6 bullet points for council use permits. I was wondering if you have any idea, like if in the last year this was in place, how many would that be that would have been put in front of council? Is that anything that you have access to?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, I don't have that information right now. It's something that we could pull and know those.
I would like to see that just because I know that for developers, having to get a council use permit, then you're then entering the political scene. And we all know that that gets a little bit sticky and complicated. And in our meetings this week, it was presented from legal that we need to remember as council members that we're not making decisions over X business and Y business. So but that's what our constituents will want us to make a decision on, right? Whether they want a Starbucks or a McDonald's or whatever. Take your pick of which one. And that's not what we are making decisions based off, and that's what it's gonna turn into. And I just feel like it's gonna be extremely burdensome to council to have 6 bullet points. If you compare that to the other cities, there's no other city that has even close to that many that are looking for the council use permits. So I do have concerns about that, but I don't know if that's 2 a year or if that's 20 a year. I just don't even know. So that's kind of why I would like that information to see what that might look like for a council. And I'm thinking of future councils as well. Like, I just don't want, there's already a lot of hard, complicated zoning issues, and to then now have to make all of these decisions about every single fast food coming in just feels very overwhelming to me. Besides the amount of resources, money, time, effort that it requires of the developers to do it as well. I think that Councilor Goforth mentioned this in our meeting, but that the community input would be important, and I think we need to do community outreach, not just, you said a lot of the community inputs come from emails, or comments that people have made online, or I don't know where you said, but most of those people, I can pick which districts they're living in and why they're upset that there's too many drive-throughs. And I get that. I totally get that. They want something different besides drive-throughs. And I don't know that this is the answer to that. And so I think that we need to look at our entire city, the whole 140 square miles of our city, to see what our community wants. I'll stop there as well. Let some other people talk.
Thank you. Ms. Duff?
Yeah, I have quite a few comments, and I'll try to get them all in a succinct way, but I agree with that many categories going into council use permit. I don't like the changes of beefing up the council use permit. I think it's costly it's arbitrary, it becomes arbitrary, and for developers, it's costly to go through that long process. I don't think we're really achieving anything by making it harder for drive-throughs by going through this process when what the council members that want to restrict drive-throughs, and I'll let them speak for themselves, is to reduce them. Wouldn't it be easier, instead of making it harder for drive-throughs, is making it easier for sit-down restaurants? We're also, I think, in a result of what happened in the market during COVID. If you were downtown, a drive-through, you were thriving. That was a way to get food. And many of the restaurants started adopting drive-throughs and patios. And those drive-throughs did well during COVID, and they're investing, and we have property, and we see it going on. And now, we can mitigate a lot of things through design standards, and I appreciate that, staff has gone through this to look at the issues and drive aisles and all these things. But I feel like we're now, a few things going on. First of all, we transitioned from restriction of drive-throughs to the aesthetics and the circulation, right? All right, okay, two different subjects. We are pushing a lot to council use permits. I don't like that. I think we just go back to the way we are. If the objective of some council members are to get more sit-downs, what can we do to incentivize or attract or have those discussions? Now, economic development was here a few weeks ago when we were talking about budgets and such. Weren't they saying they were hiring a consultant or doing some kind of plan about how to attract more?
Well, the council requested that we include that in the budget, but that has anything to do with drive-throughs. That has to do with, identifying, how do we identify the data that would help us, help us show restaurants that there are certain areas that would support sit-down restaurants.
Okay. And so there's things that we can do along those lines. I hate that we're getting into this whole drive-through thing. If I wanted to restrict anything in my city, I would be talking about check cashing and title loans and all those. I think they're more of a detriment to our community than worrying about a drive-through. Also, I do recognize that drive-throughs do bring traffic to shopping areas, and they depend on getting attract people into the lot where then, they also have some others. So developers know their business. I don't like to interfere with market of how they conduct their business. They know the supplies and demands. We can do some things on aesthetics and stacking and circulation. But I don't want to get too far down that road because that's not where we started. We didn't start with, we have a stacking problem. We have a, aesthetics problem. We don't have a circulation problem. There are areas that we have had that, but that wasn't the initial where we started. I mean, I don't know. We're going down a different path. Is it really necessary? I really question that. had a comment made to me, I don't know enough about developers, but having a 50-foot drive aisle, since most of the stacking is into the interior of the lot, having a 50-foot distance from the drive aisle, that could be a design challenge in order how that be situated. And maybe if you just got a traffic engineer, or if they deemed that there was a sufficient way that would be adequate to override the restriction that you can't have 50 feet from the drive. You can't be 50 feet from the drive aisle. Anyway, I'll let developers and zoning attorneys argue all these finer points. I'm just saying, I think we're down a different path, and I don't want to get heavy into the council use permits. I think it's complicated and arbitrary, and I think we need to be more consistent, and there's other ways to get the sit-downs if that's, I don't know. I'm going on, and I didn't initiate it, so I'll let those who maybe feel strongly about this to.
Well, Mr. Freeman is about to get up and leave, so Mr. Freeman, here's your last shot.
I just want to circle back. I really appreciate staff and everything you do. I know this has been controversial, and so I am not in favor of the council use permit. I think it just extends a lot of additional time for us, and the public input could sway opinions because, yeah, some may want a Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out burger. Well, I don't really care, but they do. And I think that for me, the design standards are appropriate. I know Nana and I have worked on some design standards. I have 5 drive-throughs on one corner, and 4 of them would be grandfathered, and the new one would be new. However, we raised the design standards for that fast food drive-through. So with that said, I think I'm okay, and I'll just recap it. Design standards I'm fine with, but not the CUP. Thank you.
Thank you. Safe travels.
Mayor, if I may add to the question about the number of council use permit that we get for drive-through. So if you look at the list of the zoning district, starting with the planned employment park, light industrial, general industrial, and heavy industrial, over 75% or almost 80% of those development have always come to council because one way or the other they are asking for reduction in parking spaces, increase in height. So right now we're going to still provide those data, but we can absolutely say majority of those development already comes to you. And it's even more challenging, those projects get delayed because we see extreme number of drive-throughs that basically doesn't make the site plan even workable. So we spend a lot of time. There are 2 or 3 projects right now that we spend so many times trying to find out what's the right number of even drive-throughs that can be permitted to make the site viable. So those projects, by the way, comes to you, and so whether we add council use permit or not, it's so most likely going to be coming to you.
But Mayor and Council, let's make it clear. We will take away that council use permit if that's what the council wants to do. We won't expand it because it was intended because there are times there are council members who are wishing they had the opportunity to have more involvement in the number, right? And just depending on what's going on. But if that's not the feeling of majority council, I think we would still endorse these other changes, especially the traffic impact study and the design standards, because then it puts us on par with the rest of the community. And as you can see, even if we take out the CUP, we're still more generous than any other community as far as the availability of locations. So, but I think we do, this goes back to quality, right? And those design standards, I think, are very important for us to maintain those landscaping buffers, those shades, awnings and things like that. I think it would be nice to be able to say we have those the same as at the other communities.
Thank you. Mr. Heredia.
I have a question and a comment. A question on, so I do think, you know, the CUP may, I think, creates more difficulty, but is the SUP or another process, at least to have a conversation, because I think the importance of some of these areas is to have tools to have at least a conversation either through our planning and zoning board or through the zoning administrator or other committees. I think the unfortunate part is that a lot of our public doesn't pay attention to the day-to-day evolutions of where drive-throughs or businesses are being located, and that's a reality, right? Until it affects their lived experiences, I think that's where they get, I think, angry about options and, you know, why was this put in, right? And things like that. We can try our best, especially on zoning. It's a lot harder to get people during the process. This happens after the fact when something happens, right? That's the effect of like the realities that we have. So my question is there a process at least to have a conversation so that you on the planning and zoning have at least a conversation around, you know, the use there? I feel, because I think I felt strongly on this, and it is never about banning or trying to restrict. I think for me it was to have a balance, and I remind folks that I don't think developers didn't even want design standards. That wasn't even part of the initial conversation. I'm glad that now they've moved into the that we will take design standards and make improvements. I think the beneficial of this discussion has allowed to create that space with them, because they didn't even want design standards in the first place. And so that's I think a benefit of this discussion that has happened. And unfortunately, you all have taken the brunt of that piece, but I'm glad that developers and commercial folks are now talking about design standards. And we hope that that brings better quality pieces and a more balance of what interactions that these drive-throughs can have in our retail locations and with neighbors and other businesses that are around these drive-throughs, because that wasn't even part of what they wanted in the first place, right? Folks were not willing to compromise, and so I think the benefits of this discussion has led to this. But that's my first question on, is there a tool there that at least we can have a conversation and not come to council per se, because I do think it's a lot onerous on the CUP process, but at least a conversation or a tool that you can have a conversation with developers that are looking for.
Explain the SUP process.
Yeah, so Mayor, Vice Mayor Heredia, so that would be through a conditional use permit, whether it was a special use permit or a council use permit. So that actually looks at the use and allows the approving body to determine kind of the impacts in whether it's appropriate for that surrounding community. If it was permitted by right, they would just be looking straightly at design standards associated with it. So currently we do have several zoning districts that require an SUP. Very early on when we came to council, our recommendation was to change some of these to an SUP, but got directed by council at the time that they wanted it to be a CUP to come to them for their discretion. But we are happy, based on your direction, to move forward however you see fit.
But today, Rachel, I'm looking at that slide where it says current. And a lot of those that under the SUP in the proposed get moved under the CUP, right?
That's correct.
So what is today, a special use permit requires what?
It would require a public hearing before either the Board of Adjustment or the Planning and Zoning Board.
But without coming to council? That's the way it is today?
Currently, yes.
And is that kind of what you're suggesting, Frankie, to continue that, or? I'm just trying to, I heard what you're saying, and I don't know if that's a whole lot different than the way we currently
Are
have
doing
set it.
things.
Yes.
No, currently, I'm sorry to interrupt, but currently, we have permitted planned employment park, light industrial, general industrial, and on the proposed, all those are listed under the CUP.
Yes, that is correct. So the
So we
proposal
don't
was to
have
move some of
it
those.
currently under SUP.
Right. And
For
so,
those.
I guess the question I'm
But
getting.
is it by right, or is it by right, it still doesn't go through, it still goes through planning and zoning, and so I think I'm not understanding the process of what we currently have for these areas that are, that you're recommending to move to a CUP?
So, Mayor, council members, today's process in the limited commercial, general commercial, planned employment park, light industrial, and general industrial, it's a design review. They're permitted by right. They don't have to go through any kind of public hearing process through either the Board of Adjustments or, if under certain circumstances, to the Planning and Zoning Board. The conditional use permit, which is the council use permit and the special use permit, for the downtown business one district, they come to city council. That's already a required CUP. And the special use permit is required for neighborhood commercial, heavy industrial, downtown business, and mixed use. Councilmember Duff is correct in that PEP, light industrial, and general industrial right now are permitted by right. Our recommendation that we had proposed to the city council is that they would move to the CUP category, as would the neighborhood commercial. That one also would move up.
And
So
that
this-
was originally proposed, Rachel, as being SUPs when we first brought it. Is that?
When we first brought it through, we had recommended that the neighborhood commercial and the limited commercial require an SUP, and council at that time had said we would like to see these as CUPs. And then going back, and when we looked at the surrounding jurisdictions and where they are allowed, it was very apparent that the number of drive-throughs in the land available to us is because of the industrial zoning districts that allow by right drive-throughs right now. And when we look at other cities, they either restrict them in those industrial districts or they require a conditional use permit, which goes to city council. So our recommendation was to align it better with the intent of the employment character area for those areas, and also the intent of the zoning district to require a council use permit.
So when it's permitted, so what we're doing is giving the public more input, is what we're doing by moving it, and the council, right?
Right.
So, I mean, in essence, I understand it may be more difficult for developers, but it's a process that allows our constituents to have a voice in this, right? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Because as it stands right now, the community doesn't get a say on it because it's permitted by right. And every other, just to verify and confirm, every other jurisdiction that you've listed, it's important enough that it requires a council use permit in those areas. Those councils want to see and have input, probably from their communities and themselves. Is that what we're saying?
That is correct. That's what we're seeing is in other jurisdictions, they require either a council use permit or in some instances are restricted from the industrial zoning
Okay,
districts.
and we're also kind of saying, as Mary pointed out, those are areas that we want to discourage, right? That type of use in those areas. Those areas are for primarily.
It's not its primary purpose. We want to make sure it doesn't impede that primary purpose
Okay.
of job creation. Is that, I think that's what.
Interfere. We want to discourage interference from that primary purpose, right?
They should be ancillary and support what we're trying to do in our industrial areas, which is to
Not
create
ban,
jobs.
not ban.
Not ban.
But just
Absolutely.
complementary to it.
And I think, but let's look at this like we look at housing, right? It's about balance, a balanced housing plan. This is not about restriction, this is about a balance and as Francisco, or as Councilmember Heredia said, this is not a ban, this is not a takeaway. Like everything we look at, it's a balance.
And I
That's my
guess the only comment is, I only suggest, I've heard kind of both sides. If the CUP feels too heavy, then theoretically, I guess we could move all those to SUPs also.
So
At least there's a public notice, there's a body, whether it's a Board of Adjustment or P&Z. So at least there's that discussion. It keeps the council out of that conversation. That's just a question, right? But you're all making a good point. It's just a matter of the council as a policy. Do you feel like from your constituents, is this something they expect you to be weighing in so they can talk to you about it? Or is it just important for them to be able to know about these? I mean, they're going to get formally notified, but they're not going to come in front of council. They'll be in front of P&Z or Board of Adjustment, correct?
A couple of questions on that. So the SUP does have community involvement.
Is it notified?
It's a public.
Yes.
And they
Sorry,
have,
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, it is a public hearing.
and so they have opportunity to come and vocalize their opposition.
That's correct.
Or approval. And then I wanted a clarification on Nana's point. I think what he was saying was that we're already getting these projects to council. So I guess, again, I just don't know how many we're talking here. So again, it's hard for me to like make a decision on that if we're talking about 2 or 20.
Yeah, I think that the challenge is they don't just sometimes necessarily come in for a drive-through. It's a broader site
Like the
plan
whole
that includes-
development.
And so that's what we're trying to balance out, is okay, we see some drive-throughs here, but we're also trying to encourage manufacturing or a job center. And so we're trying to make sure that they can integrate well and they don't conflict with each other. So that's why they're coming into us.
Okay.
It's not often that it does happen, but we're not talking about 1s and 2s, right? It's a site plan that we're looking at. That's typically this scale.
Well, probably not like in my district. They're not gonna, no one's doing a site plan. There's nowhere left to do a site plan, right?
But
So
they're
my
probably-
district's
but
gonna
they're
be a 1 or a
probably be
2.
as of right, because they're general commercial. These are typically areas where we're doing rezoning, where we're having to look at larger plots.
So how cumbersome is an SUP to a developer?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, so with any of our developments, they often require multiple different types of entitlements, but they get processed concurrently. So when you're seeing a development come through, it's really a combination of a site plan, design review, often cases, a rezoning with a PAD. So in terms of burdensome, it really depends on the case. It goes in tandem with the process that they're already doing.
Okay.
It would be additional fees, yes, for the application. But most likely, they're already going through a public hearing process, as Nana was describing.
Okay, and I would just, I wanted to make a point earlier when you were talking, Vice Mayor. The development community members that I have spoken to from the very beginning have talked about design guidelines and standards. So I didn't think that was a entirely accurate statement that none of them wanted it, because the ones that I've been talking to, like, that's what they said kind of from the very beginning. But, and I think I'll just make this point as well. I do think, I obviously don't agree with maybe the manner in which some of those loud opinions were presented, and that you guys were taking the brunt of that. That was not okay. No one should treat people like that. But I'm trying to balance, because we need developers in our community and we need to make sure their voices are heard. And I don't want to make it more burdensome and cumbersome for them. We want to make our city a friendly place to develop. So it's just trying to weigh all of that and balance it. It is hard when you do have a CUP, because then you got to make the rounds and you got to talk to all 7, and then you got to, it's a lot more of a process to have to do a CUP. And I think we really need to keep that into consideration. But as far as like which ones go into SUP and which ones CUP, I don't know how everyone, we haven't heard from Councilmember Summers yet.
Thanks for pointing me out.
Mayor, please.
You're waiting.
Protocol. It's all protocol. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I think, it's impacted my district considerably, really over the past year or so, since we came out of the pandemic, and watched the area grow tremendously. And there's a lot of frustration in that district with how slowly some of that vision has been to come to fruition. So we got to ask ourselves, we did it this morning too, when we started, what kind of city do we want to be? What do we want to be known for? The mix of housing, what kind of housing are we going to put in? What kind of industry are we going to put in? And I think this is part of that question too. I mean, look at this map. Is it this one? No, the other one. 21%, that's a lot. That's a lot of space. And Then you look at Chandler. What kind of city do we want to be? All these communities are thinking the same thing as they go through their general plan. And we need to have a serious conversation about this as well as part of that general plan. To Mr. Brady's point about Mesa being difficult to deal with, I think it's interesting when you look at these slides and you flip through them, you know, our design standards are so much lower than everybody else's. We allow these types of uses in more districts than any other city. We don't have a setback from residential. We are the only city that doesn't have a traffic impact study. Doesn't sound too difficult to me. You know, we do have to try to find a balance here so that we have that mixed uses. And I think the complaint isn't so much, listening to my constituents, isn't so much that we have too many drive-throughs. I mean, there's a Chick-fil-A coming to my district, and my wife is as excited as you could be.
That's all she ever talks about.
That's all she ever talks about. She's been talking to you, hasn't she?
Even before? Yeah.
You gave her a report. She's excited. Hey, by the way, on the other side of that is a Starbucks, so we're both happy. The issue is that in the development community that we haven't facilitated really that balance. And when you look at a road like, is it Stapley I'm thinking about? They have that mix too. I think they have a Chick-fil-A and they have
Charleston's.
Charleston's, thank you. I wanted to say Outback Steakhouse. Love them. But the Charleston's, right? So you have Charleston's and you have Chick-fil-A. You can hit whatever you want. If you're in a hurry, grab some chicken if you want to go out to a business. So I think it's fair, but here's the thing. I don't want to get into onerous processes either. That's not the intent here. The intent is how do we attract the right users? And Councilmember Duff mentioned it. Mr. Brady put $100,000 in the budget to go out and create a plan to help developers find better things. I think that is going to be one of the key components of helping us attract better uses. I think it's fair to say that we should increase the design standard only so much as other communities around us are doing it. So I'm fully in support of following these design standards. I was particularly interested by the fact that we don't have a setback from residential. Only Scottsdale does that. That's a good idea. When I was on council previously, we had it was a McDonald's, wanted to locate right by the back wall of people's homes, and you can imagine they were upset about that squawk box going on all the time. So I think putting that in the other thing is we have a Starbucks Point 22 and Signal Butte Road, very successful. And the problem is just the way that site plan sits, and it's to the current design standard. Every morning it pours out, blocks of traffic, comes back out, and it goes and it starts pouring into the street. And you have to go around them in the street. That's a problem that we could have avoided with a better site plan standard, and that's what you're heading to here. So moving forward, I would like to see, I think there's enough interest here, and I don't think there's much objection here to looking at how do we site plan these, bring our standards up to where others are, work actively to engage the community to find, to recruit the better uses here. And then moving forwards, and I'm very careful here, you know, we have a lot of zoning districts, many more zoning districts where these are allowed that other communities aren't. Not interested in taking away anybody's vested rights here, but maybe that should be a conversation about where specifically do we want restaurants to locate. And maybe it is everywhere. But maybe we would look at what these other communities are doing and say, you know, over time, if these properties move on or zone differently, because there are industrial developments in my district who did carve out a limited commercial, and I think that's appropriate if they're going to do that. And those are the types of things that would come forward. So at the very least, I think moving forward on the design standard is important. And this is very much about who we want to be as a community. That's it.
Thank you. I'll give you my thoughts. Like everyone, I think drive-throughs are part of my daily life, and I like drive-throughs, and there's probably, you know, plenty of drive-through memorabilia in the front seat of my car right now. And I don't feel like there's a stigma attached to, oh, this is a drive-through restaurant. I mean, a lot of the nice sit-down restaurants in our community right now, as a result of COVID, they have a window, you know, and I think that's the industry has evolved in a lot of ways, and so that it's a reality. And I think it is good to note that Mesa, we are overachievers when it comes to drive-throughs. I've heard some studies that have said that we are among the highest per capita communities in the country for having drive-throughs, and I think the rules that are being proposed here would make us still probably one of the more liberal cities in the area. So. I've had experiences in drive-thrus where I've gone through and I thought, man, that was a great experience, and we ought to delegate all of the problems in the world to the folks who designed that experience, and they could solve them for us because it was so well planned. I think there are a few places in Mesa that are not good examples of drive-through planning, and the traffic problems that result from them are unfortunate, and it would have been nice if they had been designed better. So I absolutely endorse the goals of improving the aesthetics and improving the circulation. I think we do need to make changes to the rules that we have with that in mind, and that being our North Star is aesthetics and circulation. Absolutely, traffic studies I would endorse. It seems like the area of potential disagreement here has to do with whether or not requiring council use permits is too burdensome or not. It seems like that's already part of our plan right now, and in the years that I've been on council, I don't remember a single case of a contentious hearing over a drive-through. Maybe I just can't remember any, but it seems like most of those are on the consent agendas, and it's just, I don't see a lot of forks and pitchfork, situations involving drive-throughs. If there are drive-throughs that would provoke that type of a neighborhood response, I'd kind of like to know about it. And that to me indicates that there's something that it needs some attention. So I personally am not opposed to the council use permit scrutiny, but if I'm in the minority, that's fine. I'll go along with whatever the consensus is. But I am in favor of, I didn't see anything in the presentation that I took issue with. So I support going forward with this, and I think there's still plenty of scrutiny to be done. I mean, the question is, should we allow staff to come up with these, put it in writing, vet it through planning and zoning, give it to the industry, have them come back with, here's our specific areas of heartburn, and then let's have a come to Jesus meeting with the industry and say, okay, maybe we went a little far somewhere, and we can tweak it.
I would second that.
Ms. Duff.
I would like to propose one change, and I see how the council feels about it, that we take the planned employment park, light industrial, general industrial, and heavy industrial, and move it into the SUP. Currently, it is in the permitted, and leave the neighborhood commercial in the CUP, which currently it is not. And then, of course, downtown business, which is currently, that's no change there. Would that be a balance of getting the Board of Adjustment to review more of the industrial and employment parks? And it is still a public opportunity. And then as far as going through council, we leave it to the neighborhood, commercial, and downtown business, which it always has been. Just a suggestion, if that meets
I think that, this is our opportunity to make those suggestions to staff, so I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, so wait, I just want to make sure I understand. You're saying take the light industrial, general, and heavy, all the industrial out
And
of the
the
CUP?
planned employment park.
Okay.
Which weren't there before, and putting them into an SUP. So there is review where there wasn't review before, but it is handled by the Board of Adjustment, by people who professionally look at how it's fitting into the use and the area and it's appropriate. And then the conditional use permit or council use permit, stay for downtown business one, always has been, retain that, and adding the neighborhood commercial, which it is part of the proposal now. Previously, it was not. Is that correct?
Councilman, you're just suggesting that we don't change the CUP as it is today. It still only goes to downtown business. And everything else that we were going to move under CUP instead move under SUP?
But retain neighborhood
Yeah.
commercial under CUP.
Oh, neighborhood, oh, move it up into, because it's now under SUP, right?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, because I think that's where we get the biggest feedback and concerns about the interface with residential, and that is the neighborhood commercial properties.
I guess I feel a little opposite. I feel a little bit more that our employment areas are significant, and I would rather have council input on possible disruptions of our employment districts. To me, that sort of level of priority is a higher priority to me, so I would disagree a little bit with that.
But has it been a problem?
I think
Has
that's
it
where
been a
most of
problem?
that's where most conversations are coming, is in that
Okay,
lighting.
all right.
Yeah. Light, mostly light, limited, is it limited commercial or light? I don't know.
Light industrial.
Light industrial.
Yeah, at least moves the needle. Plus, if we add the design standards to it. you
So
know.
what do you, I'm sorry.
I seconding the idea. At least, we're not deciding anything here today. It's just, we're trying to massage something to move it forward. We're gonna have to go back into the community and see what they think. We'll send people with you.
So I think
Helmets.
sometimes
We're gonna
it
get
just-
you helmets.
Yeah, just a comment, and just, sometimes it's easier to start with the more restrictive, and then council can lessen it up later. Because if you start with the SUP and then you decide, no, really, we really did want that to be a council use permit, then it kind of, it's a little more, it's not impossible, but it just kind of puts people on notice. Now, obviously, you'll probably get a pretty visceral reaction, as you've already started to get, about putting more under CUP, but at least we can have that conversation, or not. And if we start with SUP, I think the opportunity to go back up to CUP is possible, but it kind of like, the public process kind of feels like the reverse. It's easier to compromise down than to level up, I guess, is all.
Sure, but I mean, we have a list of things that we're switching into the CUP process here. I think this is what you're referring to as a pretty strong footing. And what Councilmember Duff, if I may reference her idea, is she sees where we're going with this, but maybe move a few other categories that we're gonna go from permitted into a CUP. Councilmember Duff, if I
It was a compromise move, so, but, you know.
I think it's worth, I would like to see her idea on paper and bounce off the community, and it might be something that's palatable to the entire group, because we need to come to a consensus. Not today, but.
I guess the question is what we're going to take to the public.
Yeah,
Right.
we have to kind of decide our draft.
Ms.
So,
Pillsbury.
I guess I just want to go on record then of voicing, even though I feel like I'm probably in the minority, that I'm not for more regulation at all on this part of it. So I would like to deal with this issue through the design standards and not through CUPs and SUPs. So I guess I don't even feel like the compromise is feeling great with how I feel. So that's where I'm at. I don't know where Mark's.
For me, I think adding a layer for public to be notified, I think that's important. SUP, maybe that's a compromise. I feel like the last 2 years or a year and a half since I think has led us to this point. So I don't know about your point, Mr. Brady, on the starting high or low, but I think SUP might be a compromise here. But does that then give you, I guess, a process question, give you the tools to make sure we have those standards in place?
Those would be, you could do those
separate,
regardless of whether we change the process. So if, going to your point, help me out, I'm just gonna say, you could take today permitted, we're not changing, no one's suggesting permitted for limited commercial and general commercial. That makes sense, right? That's where they should be going.
Sure.
But permitted, we would move the planned employment park, the light industrial, the general industrial, like what I'm listening to you say, you could take those three and slide those under the special use permit. Today they're permitted, otherwise now they would have to go through at least P&Z or Board of Adjustment.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. One clarification, the heavy industrial, would that also be compromised by putting into the SUP area from the CUP area?
Isn't
So
it already there?
PEP, light industrial,
Oh,
general
PEP.
industrial, and heavy industrial. There are 4 that we had moved up.
What is it now? Heavy industrial?
It says SUP,
Currently, it requires an SUP.
so you wouldn't change that.
I think I'm asking, when we talk about moving the planned employment park, light industrial, and general industrial to the SUP, are we also talking the heavy industrial being moved down to the SUP?
It's already there.
It's already there.
I believe Mary was saying just for our proposal, for what we bring back to you.
Oh, in the current slide, it shows it under SUP.
Right.
And it's moved up to CUP.
Right, all I'm saying, I'm taking the current slide.
Okay, sorry.
And just moving those bottom 3 that are under permitted and sliding them down under SUP. Well, I wasn't gonna suggest that, I was just. Yeah. But Frank, you see what I'm doing? If you take that current slide, you take the ones that are permitted, the PEP, the light industrial, the general industrial, to your point of, I want some kind of public notice, public participation.
Something, I
Then
think
those
that
3
makes
would
sense.
slide under the SUP.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, you know, when you're hearing this, some, you know, neighborhoods, I think outcry on having, you know, 9 drive-throughs being in one master plan area, I think that's not being creative, right? Like, we had to have a conversation on how we balance that piece. And so I think that's just the ongoing, at least a conversation that needs to be had, and given the tools to have that conversation, to how do we get better, right? Like, I think that's the overall, how do we do this better as a city, as far as we're looking at planning, you know, in various facets of how we live, right? Like, I think people need to have options and figure out those options. I think with our committees and our commissions and our council, I think we can tackle that as a team effort. But I think it makes sense to have at least a conversation in these pieces. And we're still gonna be, I think, generous. I think in retrospect, I think we should have started maybe with these maps, right? Because a lot of the rhetoric about us not being friendly to drive-throughs, I think that would have been squashed by these maps, right? Because we are extremely friendly, and we're still gonna be, as the mayor pointed out, very friendly to have more drive-throughs. And I think that's part of this, you know, whole conversation that we just evolve, right? As far as how we can create options and have, you know, better spaces for folks to experience.
And Mayor and Council, just to provide a little bit of clarification on the SUP and CUP process. So when something is permitted by right, if it's coming for a site plan, it does get public notice. The difference is that when the approving body, whether it's the planning director or planning and zoning or city council, we don't have the discretion to look at the use and say, no, we don't want that. We're strictly looking at the design guidelines, the development standards at that point to say, is it meeting this criteria? Then yes. With the special use permit or a council use permit, at that point, those uses where they have a conditional use permit, it's supposed to be for uses that are more impactful. So then we can say, is this, is there an over-concentration of these uses in this area? Do we think this would be impactful to surrounding neighborhoods? Do we see through the traffic impact study that we think that this, would be too impactful for our adjacent roadways, those things? At that point, the use itself is approved, whereas just through the site plan and permitted, it's not up for discussion.
And that was my point from the start, I think, to build in that context, right? Have the ability for you all as professionals, build in that context to have at least that conversation, because we were just then approving if they fit the mold. We couldn't have any conversation on building context. Okay, have you thought about this differently, or, how do you interplay with the other, folks in your complex that you're building? So I think that is an important item that you mentioned, Rachel. I think the importance of building that context with you all to have those tools to have that conversation with these developers.
Mr. Summers.
I would be okay to moving the general industrial and LI into the CUP and then having that conversation to move this forward. I don't want to make this CUP. The council members have made great points. We don't want to get bogged down on CUPs, and the last thing I want to have happen is that these things come forward, they actually turn out to be fine, and then it turns into the liquor license thing, right? All we do is, yes, because there's nothing wrong with the liquor license. Most of them are pretty mundane. It's this arcane system. So, but protecting I can get on board just for the sake of moving forward, at least looking at the idea of adding those two categories that are for jobs to that CUP, with the understanding that we need to go through our attorney's office. I'm not interested in taking anybody's rights away. We have to protect those rights, and how we would do that. So your input is going to be very important, Jim.
I know you need to move forward, and I'm not going, I expressed my idea on compromise, and we'll go in there, but I just do also want to bring up the importance of looking at our city as far as our land use, creating our activity centers, that we have walkable areas that are embracing of services and sit-down restaurants and people, and creating those areas that are very mixed use, and sticking to making that a center, an area for people to collect and socialize and frequent the businesses. And where would that be? And that, maybe a drive-through is not appropriate there in a very walkable area. So that we're not trying to be everything to everybody on every corner. Identifying those areas that we want to be very walkable and inviting. And where is that activity center in each of our districts, or where is it in our land use, instead of just letting it totally erode and trying to treat every piece of land exactly the same. I think it's important that we do that for building community, not driving 10 miles to get your groceries or to go to the sit-down restaurant, things like that. So that'll get into another conversation. That's more about land use. But I want to say, I think we get into these conversations because we're so uniform in how we approach each property, and we should look at it to maybe some alterations to create an environment that I think people want, and not get into the legalities of applying it to every piece of property. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, that was a great discussion. I think we are clearly a little undecided on the whole SUP, CUP, industrial debate, and my suggestion would be that we march forward as it was presented, with the understanding that this is an open question at this level, that I think we could go, if we had to vote today, I'm not sure what the vote would be, but I think we're not voting today. It would be a mess. So let's run it up the flagpole. Let's take it to P&Z. Let's have some, let's put it in writing and put it out to the development industry and see what the reaction is, and then we will make a decision when the time to make a decision is. Does that sound okay?
We'll get some flak jackets.
All right.
Good armor.
Yeah. Yeah, so I say that let's march forward as presented, and then with the idea that it's probably not written in stone, and we'll probably evolve.
And we'll have a better conversation about a CUP, SUP, and the different uses, which might fit better there. Because that's really what I'm hearing is that conversation is what fits. If we move out of the CUP, what do we move into the SUP?
And then if we could get maybe what it would have looked like this last year or something. I think that's helpful.
All right, thank you for wrestling with this, we appreciate it. Next is current events and conferences attended. I know you've been busy, Mr. Summers.
I'll just mention the one I was at today, and that's Boeing had a small ceremony in recognition of Memorial Day coming up today. They presented with a little photo of, you ought to like that, that's in your district, of what flies overhead. Boeing is one of our most important private industries here in Mesa. They do incredible work for our national defense. This weekend, as everybody travels, just remember it's of course to thank a veteran, but this weekend is really about remembering the veterans that didn't make it home. This weekend I was working at the fire station at the airport. We did a line for a veteran. We do this every once in a while. But a veteran was coming home. Turned out the veteran was from the Korean War. The body had been missing for 70 plus years. And he was a Medal of Honor recipient. He stood in front of his battalion wounded while an overwhelming number of the enemy was coming forward toward his battalion. He stood there with machine guns providing them cover so they could escape, and he did not. And for that, he was awarded this nation's highest medal, but he sacrificed himself to do it. And that's what this weekend is about, remembering those people who didn't make it home. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Ms. Pillsbury.
Quickly, I'll just talk about a couple of things this week. The Shepherd Junior High, their 8th grade advanced art class did a kindness mural, so they invited me because of my kindness campaign, and it was the 8th grade advanced art class. It's really beautiful, really cool, right when you walk in Shepherd Junior High. I wanted to thank them for that. And then on Tuesday, I got to attend the Taylor Junior High Awards ceremony and give out some mayor awards on behalf of the mayor. That's where all my kids went, so that was fun. And then I just wanted to say congratulations. Today is the last day of school for Mesa Public Schools, so we have 6 high schools with graduating seniors tonight, and wanted to say congratulations to all of them. And the teachers. And all the teachers. Yes, thank you to all the teachers and administrators.
Amen. I'm sure we have some folks over here.
Yeah,
Ms. Goforth?
I attended a congratulations event yesterday at Mesa Academy for Advanced Studies. I joined the staff of the Solid Waste Division to congratulate Kristen Beltran for winning this year's winner of the Earth Day contest. She did a beautiful art piece and wrote a poem, and so she was our winner this year, and the rest of the school received some school supplies and different things, so that was neat. I got to speak at the Rotary Club last week, and that was nice. Thank you for having me there. I also spoke at the LD10 Republican meeting. That was, thank them for having me as well. And I did a Waterwise story time at Red Mountain Library yesterday as well, and that was super fun, super fun with the little kids. So anyway, thank you to the library. And then had a good, was out and about in my community, was at Dolce Vita restaurant, had a great conversation with the owner there about small business and running restaurants in Mesa. So those events. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Jen?
Along the lines of what Councilmember Summers brought up about, recognizing our fallen heroes. In downtown Mesa, we have the Hometown Heroes Banner Program, and there will be banners. There's going to be a formal unveiling tomorrow morning, and there will be banners throughout downtown there to see some of our veterans, and they're displayed their little story. You can get a map at the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Mesa Association, local businesses will have them. And also there's a website, mesaveteransprogram.com, and you can follow the map and give homage and respect to those veterans who have served us. This past week has been very busy. I did a Whataburger grand opening yesterday. And at Stapley and Baseline, they employ 90 people there, and they do some things for the community. Last night, some of us attended the CAP, Central Arizona project, about the water supplies in Northeast Mesa at Borden Batten, and talked about the agreement between California, Nevada, and Arizona and conservation of, I think it's 3 million acre feet. And so that was good. Last week, also, the East Valley Partnership had their annual meeting. That was at the Mix Center. That was very interesting. I did go to the Paz de Cristo last week and sit down with COPA and talked about homelessness and what their talked to the navigators and what their firsthand experience is with the homeless and what things are missing and what things are working. It was very interesting. Also, I'll let the mayor cover maybe the arts and service program that we attended last week. And you're going to CompuDoc to Santander?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, and then it's not June yet. Okay, we will talk about, we did a photo this morning for Pride Month, which is June, and so we have our rainbows, some of us have rainbows on, but we'll talk, say Happy Pride Month in just a week. Thanks.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yesterday, a bunch of us went to Santander, CompuDoc, set up a laptop distribution site at their offices here in West Mesa. I think they gave away 150 laptops. So really great to see those efforts continue in the community. Also was the Secretary of Energy, Secretary Granholm was here in the East Valley a couple of days ago with Senator Kelly visiting Li-Cycle, recycling company that's recycling lithium and cobalt and a bunch of other neat, interesting items to be reused in electric vehicles and other pieces. So they have a Mesa location where you can drop off items, but we were visiting the Gilbert location where they process these things to be able to recycle. So really a great company and recycling of that material, so such needed here. And then tomorrow, just want to highlight, there's the 2023 Desert Challenge Games. I think the mayor, myself, and maybe other council members will be attending at Mesa Community College. I think various different, over the last several years, Mesa's hosted the Desert Challenge Games. Folks with disabilities, are able to participate, and it is a precursor. You can qualify for the United States, I think, entries. If you win, you can, go and compete nationally. So really exciting adaptive sports games there that's happening this weekend. So
great. Thank you. Please, yeah.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, I did, Visit Mesa invited me to go with them to San Antonio, Texas for a couple days this week and to the IPW conference. I just wanted to thank them. It was a great experience. Learn a lot about what they do at those types of events. So thank you.
Thank you. I want to give congratulations to our council member, Julie Spilsbury, who was named a Flynn Brown Scholar. That's a prestigious opportunity. So it's an invitation to do a whole lot of work, and so we look forward to what Julie is going to get out of that program, and I congratulate her for that prestigious appointment. I think it's worth noting that last Thursday, our study session was a joint meeting with the Mesa Public School Board. I just appreciated the opportunity to meet with them, and the way that our organizations overlap is so important and to the people that we serve. So I appreciate the good work that Mesa Public Schools does and the great partnerships we had with them. Councilmember Duff talked about the Arts and Service Award. This is a ceremony. We have some, as people know, some wonderful arts programs at the Mesa Arts Center, some arts classes. And one of the best uses of that facility is this Arts and Service program where Boeing and others support inviting veterans to come and take arts classes. And they are passionate artists, and the work that they do, and that you get the obvious therapeutic effect of giving that opportunity to veterans is really wonderful to see. And so thank you to the Salt River Pima Indian community and Boeing and others who make generous donations to make that program possible. I appreciate Ms. Spilsbury accompanying me to the Mesa High Baccalaureate on Sunday. Mesa High's got a lot of great traditions, and that I appreciated that invitation, and also appreciated the invitation to speak earlier this week to the Eastmark Leadership Group. Appreciate all the good work that they do. That's all I have. Mr. Brady, what does our schedule of future meetings look like?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to remind the council, June 1st, I know many of you are in other places than here, but we really need a quorum. It would be nice to have. One of the reasons is we don't have any other items other than reviewing the agenda for the 5th, but the June 5th agenda, this is agenda not to be missed, because it is the agenda where we will adopt the budget. It is the budget that has the CIP in it, and it also has, the council will be adopting every year we have to adopt our policy for the PSPRS. And so we'll be presenting that on the 1st, but it will be adopted on the 5th. So there's some important things on that June 5th agenda that we'll be reviewing on June 1st.
Could we have a longer study session on the 5th to do that before the council meeting, since so many of us are going to be gone?
Yes, we could. We've pushed off the items from June 1st. That study
other
session to June 5th,
presentations.
including the secondary property tax rate and some other things. So all we're doing is reviewing the agenda on the 1st. I mean, but on that agenda for the 5th is what I'm saying includes the budgets, the CIP, and the pension policies.
Yeah, I think that a lot of us do have conflicts on the 1st. I will be traveling out the night before to the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting, but I will be attending via Zoom. Vice Mayor will be conducting that meeting Thursday morning. So I think it's to the extent we can participate virtually if necessary. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, it's just, I don't think it'll take much time. We just need, I'd like you to at least see that agenda. There may be some questions, and because on that agenda, just like we'll do oftentimes, we'll present the item on that agenda. And that's the one that we want to make sure we present to the council. We do it every year, but I just think it's important for you to kind of see where we are in our pension liability. It shouldn't be a long presentation, but I think it's important before you take action on it on Monday the 5th.
Okay. Thank you. Any other meetings we need to be aware of? Okay. All right, thank you. That concludes everything on the agenda for today. Is there a motion to dismiss or to adjourn? Thank you, Ms. Spilsbury. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.